We don't even get a title screen. You know what? I'll edit in the title screen right here. There you go.
We'll get it in post.
Whoa, look at that title screen.
Oh, it's so amazing.
That title screen was the best.
Isn't it great? Wasn't it great? And that title screen signifies that we are here. It is the Mack Flash 5. Hello, everybody. Hi, guys.
Hello.
It's good to see you guys.
Good evening.
We have got a doozy. Everyone's super.
Where's my pipe?
Professor AB, the talented Mr. Despins, Mack Flash, Mike versus the world, and the D student. And of course, it is me, Frankie No Books, your host. We are doing top 5 movies based on books. I was frightened, man. I was frightened about this. I avoided this at all costs. But in the end, I looked and I was like, I developed a method to the madness, let's say.
All right.
How I was going to pick, how I was going to do this. So, as we always do, we're going to talk about our top 5 movies this week based on books and a little bit of a twist later on. We'll talk about that after, but this is how we proceed. We go number 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, starting with the person who came up with the theme. This happens to be Mike. Mike, take it away with your number 5.
All right. So a little preface to why I picked this category. I have a love-hate relationship for movies that are made out of books. Because, surprise, surprise, I enjoy a good book. And you can tell from the glasses. So my whole philosophy with, film adaptations of books is the same as like remakes. And we've had this conversation amongst ourselves. If you can't do it right, don't do it is kind of my philosophy. So that's what this category was sort of was inspired from that. So then it became, okay, what do I put into this category? What makes a good adaptation, right? Like, does it have to be shot for shot, word for word? Like, if that were the case, I would have put this sucker on there, but I didn't because it's almost identical to the book. So I just chose ones that, to me, were either they added something that made it better, right? Or they took away something that wasn't needed, but they didn't injure the source material that I loved. So that's kind of how I made my choice. Now, you guys might have different ones, but that's kind of how I made mine. So my number 5, we'll start right off the bat, is a great example of a book that's not too long. It's actually a children's book. And it was written by a man named Neil Gaiman, and who's an amazing author. He's done Sandman and Stardust and all sorts of amazing titles, and even written for shows and things. So you knew it was going to be a good book anyways. So the movie is Coraline. 2009's Coraline.
Oh, I like that movie. I like that movie a lot.
And I picked this one because I better. Coraline.
Nice.
I picked this one because it was a great example to me of where you got the right person to make a film about a creepy ass book. The book in of itself, not very long. Okay, you could fire this off in a night or two reading it. Audiobook it in a couple hours. It's creepy enough on its own, but it's quite simple being a children's book. So then what do? They go and get Henry Selick to make the stop motion film, which if you've ever seen Nightmare Before Christmas, which you better have, if you haven't, get out of here. But then you know that style, right? That look. And man, is that not perfect for the story of Coraline, which is essentially just one of those classic kids sort of other world, parallel universe type stories, sort of like Alice in Wonderland, maybe Labyrinth, things like that, right? That classic, oh, this thing happened, or did it really happen? Was it just a dream? Parents don't really believe it, that kind of thing. But in the style of animation that Selick has, everything just popped. Coraline going through the tunnel from the world, her regular world, into the other world with her other mother, and just the creepiness of the different creatures and the button eyes on all of the characters. I'm not going to tell the whole plot point of the movie, but just every little thing he did was an improvement to me on the story. And he didn't change a whole lot in his remake. The only real thing I noticed, as I'm going to kind of point out throughout all of mine, was that they did add a character. If you haven't read the book and you've watched the movie, the character of YB, there's a boy that exists only in the film. Yep. And they use him sort of as a vehicle to sort of assist Coraline. It's the one thing I don't really like because it takes away from her independence. Because in my opinion, the whole thing's supposed to be about how she can do it all herself.
Right.
She survives on her own and gets back away from the other mother and this sort of other world. But anyways, stunning film. That's my number 5.
One of the first movies I saw in 3D.
Oh, yeah.
That I said,
yes.
This is where a perfect example of how 3D should be used, not just as a gimmick, but really the 3D accentuated the story.
Yeah.
It came with those. You're right. And I wanted to mention, I'm glad you said that. Like literally all the parts were perfect for 3D. Not just that kind of like, here, we're going to go, woo, not that kind of thing.
No.
But, they
use that parallax. They use that parallax that they do in the stop motion. I'm a big fan, as you said, of The Nightmare Before Christmas. And so to see this, another Henry Selick film was like, oh, good. Finally, another one. And the fact that it was in 3D, I saw it in theaters. Beautiful film. Good choice. I like that one. Number 5, The D Student. Matt, what you got for us, buddy?
For my number 5, my number 5 is my number 5 because it's not really a book, it's a play, but it's usually required reading in schools and stuff. I went with something, it's been adapted quite a few times, but I went with the 1996 version of the Baz Luhrmann directed Romeo plus Juliet.
Yeah. Good one. That's a sick movie.
I rewatched it not too long ago, and then again for this, and I enjoyed it way more than I did in 1996, because then it was all about Pretty Boy Leo before you really discover, he is a good actor. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
So if anyone who hasn't seen it, you should. It's the Romeo and Juliet. The dialogue is lifted straight from the play. They speak in that all Shakespearean flowery talk, but it's set in contemporary times. It's set in 1996. So instead of swords, they use guns. And instead of chariots, they have cars. It's all set within Southern California beach town, and the fighting families are something. It's not like they're mob families, but I mean they clearly have violent tendencies towards each other, as they do in the original play and stuff. But it's not clear what kind of business they're in. They're businessmen for sure, rival companies or something, and they want to kill each other essentially. But watching it again, I really liked it. Kind of for me launched Claire Danes. I know a lot of people watched her on her show before that, but that was my first introduction to Claire Danes, who I've become a fan of and watched like every season of Homeland, and it's done now, so I don't know what she's going to show up in next, but I know I'm going to watch that too. It's got an amazing soundtrack laid under it.
Yes.
It's pretty much like MTV presents Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, definitely. It was written for a generation, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking that's why it made your list for the soundtrack. I'm like,
that would make my soundtrack for sure. That has my all-time favorite Radiohead song, Talk Show Host, and it's only on that soundtrack.
Yeah,
love that
song.
Right?
I think I just read about that. I don't know who wrote that song for Radio, or which member of Radiohead wrote that song, but he was inspired by the 1968 version of Romeo and Juliet. Cool. And that's what made him write the song. And then, because
it was originally supposed to be exit music for a film was supposed to be on that soundtrack, and they took that off and put the talk show host instead.
And I think exit music for a film is on the extended soundtrack, where they released the second volume of the music inspired by the movie. And I think exit music for film is on that one.
I think that's the song I'm talking about. Exit music.
Oh yeah, exit music for a film was written for the film, but then they decided to change it and go with.
And that's the song when he saw the '60s Romeo and Juliet, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna write that song." That's what inspired him to write that song.
Great too.
There was a lot of that contemporary Shakespeare I got super into. There was Hamlet with Ethan Hawke, and then with I believe Josh Hartnett, and so when they were churning out a lot, like 10 Things I Hate About You, I was like 13 on to like 17, and I was like, contemporary Shakespeare is awesome. So
but for a few of those, they just use like the story
Mhm.
I mean, but this is pulled dialogue.
Yeah, that and Hamlet are
Hamlet did it too.
The dialogue. That Hamlet cast is good too.
That is the one drawback of the Baz Luhrmann version is the fact that it is in Shakespearean English, which I can't stand. I just cannot stand it. So like
Did we just become best friends?
Oh, I think you and I, as different as you and I are, we are very alike. I've noticed rewatching these episodes being like, yeah, we have a lot in common. And if that's one of those, I hate that stuff. And so that movie, if they could have like a newly redubbed version of just have it in English, it's not that I don't understand it. It's that it's annoying. Yep. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Baz and Leo are a good team. I'll say that.
Great movie for sure. I haven't seen Gatsby.
It's good.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I'm gonna have to see that. Well, it's down to me for number 5, and I approached this a little differently because, admittedly, I don't read. It sounds like an exaggeration, but I could probably, if you made me enumerate all the books I've read in French and English on paper, I'd probably stall at 15. It's rough. I don't read. I'm more of a visual guy. I like the visual medium a lot. And now the books I have read, I have enjoyed. So it's not that I don't, my brain comprehends it. I can get into a story. I can get into a book, and I have. So what I did here is the reason I'm prefacing this is because a lot of the books that I have read that have been made into movies, we've already talked about. And so, how we're all trying to, expand and not talk about the same movies. So I said, okay, I'm going to do my list on movies I liked a lot that were based on books, but that I like so much, I wouldn't mind reading the book as a guy who doesn't read. You know what I mean? Like, there's like, okay, I'll read. So examples of that movies that have done that to me that we've talked before, Goodfellas, I've read Wise Guy. And Fight Club, I read the book. And what are those guys? Like, the book was better. Like, the book is only better because it has deleted scenes. It's the same thing. It's just like, but it's like got extra scenes that make it like, oh, that's even better. So I picked 5 movies that I love that are based on books, but that I would, I'd be like, yeah, I would read that. The number 5. It's only because I've seen it recently. It's by one of my favorite directors, which I don't even know if I knew it was by that guy. And I waited a long time before I saw this. And one night was like, this is what I'm gonna watch tonight. And I threw Gone Girl on.
Oh yes.
Gone Girl.
Don't get this guy. That guy started.
Mute Scott's mic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit you up in about 3 hours.
Gone Girl was like, oh, I see what this movie's gonna be about. And then you're like, it keeps and thenning, and you're like, holy jumping. I literally one of those, I didn't expect that. And you're like, you sort of expected it, but you were surprised still. No. I did not expect how Gone Girl went, and to the point where I'm like, I can't imagine how reading this would be exciting because the slower pace of having to read with it without having it, fed to you. I think reading it could actually be like an exciting read. Plus, they leave stuff out, they change stuff for movies and stuff. So it'd be fun to see, like, as enthralling as that was, and as the trope goes that the book is better. Well. I'm in. I'm in for that adventure. So, Gone Girl, number 5.
Cool.
Solid pick.
Awesome. So I take it Mr. Despins enjoys that movie.
I imagine you'll be talking about it soon.
It's got Ben. Movies, Ben is bombing. Phantoms and Gone Girl.
Agreed. And you know what? I'm gonna have to watch it again because I was by myself when I watched it, and my wife did not see it. So I was like, oh, I get to be like, hey, honey, want to watch a good movie?
I just watched that movie. With Natalie on a projector on the outside of our house, and it's facing the neighbor's kids' room. So if they saw Neil Patrick Harris's throat get slit, that's on them.
It's on them.
That's on them.
It's on them. You got curtains for a reason, children.
Yeah.
All right, number 5, Professor AB in the house. A little bit of the pipe happening over there.
So I'm in a similar boat with Mike, or I wanted to pick books that I love that were made into movies that I love, that I felt that adapted it really, really well, and I would love both of them. And so this one is the only one that I haven't read the actual book. I listened to the audiobook of, and the audiobook is astronomically funny and entertaining. One of the best audiobooks I've ever read. And honestly, François, you need to check out this movie, and you need to check out the audiobook of this, because I think that this is right up your alley and like right into your wheelhouse of like comedy.
Right.
Okay, and so the movie is from 2012, directed by Don Coscarelli, and it's John Dies at the End.
I knew you were putting it on the list.
And it's
I heard about
this book, John Dies at the End, by David Wong. And so honestly, the audiobook I've listened to a couple times. Yeah. I just was listening to it today, trying to get through it today, but I didn't finish it in time. But it is so really, really wacky and funny. Like, it's just I don't think I've ever read anything like it. It's just really weird, and it's got all kinds of like just weird references in it, and it's just a strange story. I'm not going to get into the details because it's too weird to even talk about. But
please don't.
It's
only because I'm like, I've always wanted to see that movie, and I haven't.
Yeah.
And now that you're like, and now that you made a whole deal about François, you might like this movie.
Honestly, like, when I watched it the other night, and then when I'm listening to it, I'm like, François needs to listen to this because I think he'd friggin' die laughing. I think you'd love it. I was killing myself laughing at work listening to it, and my coworkers were like, "What is going on over there?" I was literally laughing out loud. But yeah, the book is separated into two big stories, and so the movie takes pretty much the bulk of the first story and kind of sprinkles in stuff from the second story, and then kind of wraps up both things. And so it doesn't exactly adapt the whole book, but I think it does an incredible job. And on top of it, just the fact that this movie got made is incredible to me, because it is so. Like, I would love to be in the meeting when they like pitch this book and this movie to be made, because when they start describing it and like just describing some of the stuff that goes on in this movie, you're like, I don't know about this. It's just so out there. Yeah. But it is incredibly entertaining.
It's on one of the streamers right now. I don't know if it's Prime or
Prime Crave. Video. It's on Prime, I think.
It's on Prime. Oh, I have that. Okay, I'm gonna put it on. You know what? Maybe after this, I'll stay up really late.
It's definitely. Nice. I audio booked it too, because Andrew, I remember we talked. You told me about this one, and this was a couple years ago, anyways. And I remember listening to it at first, going, "What the hell is going on?" And then I'm listening to it, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm getting into this." I mean, I like a good Kurt Vonnegut, like weird kind of whatever. And then I was like, okay, what else does this guy got, right? So then it was like, give me the next audiobook, because he's got a few, right? And so
this is part of a trilogy. This is the first one of a trilogy, and all three are really, really good and funny.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, the first two are the best, I think. But
agreed.
Yeah, but anyways, solid.
I'm gonna have to watch that one.
John dies at the end.
Spoiler alert.
But I know a lot of the movie. I just don't know that.
Maybe.
Who knows?
It doesn't even matter. To be honest, it doesn't even matter. Yeah. It doesn't even matter.
It's not about if, it's about how.
So one last thing on that though. I knew a man. No, I made that part up. Hair. Camel Holocaust.
Everyone right now is going, Andrew's having a stroke.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I thought we weren't going to have to edit the show at all, but apparently I'm wrong.
Oh, no, you're leaving that in there. You're leaving that in there.
I watch that movie for that scene now. Now I'm like, shit, I have to watch that movie for that scene.
Yeah, for real. All right, the talented Mr. Despins, you're up next for number 5, rounding it up.
Same thing. I wanted to keep my books and movies to books. So the caveat is the book, I had to have read it and enjoyed it and enjoy the film. So like, while there are movies that I know are better than my number 5, like Jurassic Park or To Kill a Mockingbird, I've never read them, so I automatically do not qualify them. So there are quite a few for me to choose from because only kind of books I read are ones that are adapted or from movies that I like, ties in the Star Wars universe, or biographies. So I have a few to play with. So I wanted to pick something fun for my number 5. I remember reading this back in high school. I got into this movie. It's a schlocky 90s thriller. It's fun. And I remember getting the book, reading it. And I honestly forgot about this until I was going back through my collection and stuff. It was a book, 1995, written by Peter Abrams. And it was greenlit immediately for a film, 1996, directed by Tony Scott, starring Robert De Niro and Wesley Snipes, Bobby Rayburn. It's 1996's The Fan.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, cool.
I love that movie.
And
Awesome.
it's a fun
That's awesome.
I
thriller
love that movie.
that will never. Yeah, no one's ever going to
I've
talk
never
about it.
seen it, but I've always been curious about it.
That's super
It feels
good.
like it's a thriller,
And
right?
it ages really well. So in it, Robert De Niro plays this really down, really like schlocky knife salesman, and he's super creepy and he's really off, and it's in that mid-90s era of like falling down and this, and he's just having the worst day of his life. Divorced, kid hates him, all this. Favorite baseball player is Wesley Snipes, back in a baseball role, just signing with the San Francisco Giants, and starts off on a bad slump. So Gil, who's Robert De Niro, wants to inject himself in his life, and he thinks the reason of the slump is because Bobby doesn't have the number that he wants to wear. And as it's going, he's not all there, which is a common theme in a lot of the books that I'm going to bring up tonight of a main character. But he becomes slowly obsessed with Bobby and injects himself in his life, and then ultimately murders involved and stalking and things like this, to the point where the final act is so balls out crazy. But for me, being 15 at the time and really enjoying these actors, and Tony Scott's direction is very cool, and it being baseball and it being about fandom and obsession, I really enjoyed it. And I rewatched the movie again, and I was just like, there's a lot to say in this movie, because now more than ever, fandom is obsessive in the ways that it was more so than it was in 1995 and 96, right? People feel owed by the properties that they love. So you see it with movie fandoms, you see it with sports team fandoms, you feel, how De Niro does all this for Snipes to get him out of his funk and injects himself. Snipes doesn't know any of this, but De Niro feels he's owed a thank you, because now Snipes is slowly getting his groove back, but he's like, I don't know you, I don't owe you. And then again, like I said, is this cat and mouse game that goes through into the final act. And in the movie and the book, they don't change much. The ending is the same in the both, and it's just kind of like, this is insane. But like I said, for 15-year-old me reading the book, I'm like, this is fun. He can pretend to be the umpire and kidnap his kid. I'm enjoying this. So again, 1996 is The Fan.
Hey, Liam Neeson can be Leslie Nielsen, I should say, not Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
He can be an umpire.
But I'm like,
Awesome.
I could pick better movies that would fit. But no, The Fan is never going to come up on a
Fan
list.
is awesome.
It's a fun. I mean, not fun. Weird to say because it's thriller. But I remember when I was in my De Niro period, sort of in high school, and no one had known, like, you knew all his others, right? But no one knew that one. But I was like one of my favorites because I love baseball, right? And Wesley Snipes, Passenger 57, all that. It was like the perfect
Snipes'
De Niro.
90s is unbelievable.
Yeah. Solid.
Yeah. Really? Okay. All right. The Fan. And like I said, I've always been intrigued by it. And now it's like, and it was based on a book.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I don't think I knew that.
I didn't know that either.
Book also called The Fan?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Perfect.
Cool. And I didn't know it was written in 95 and greenlit immediately. So that's always cool. It's cool to see like when novels turn into books, because they're obviously like super popular.
Yeah. Was there like a fad at the time of sports movies or baseball movies, or was just really because the on its own merit?
It's definitely like a 90s thriller. Like it's right in that like 90s thriller era of like a million of those like single white female and stuff. So
yeah. Yeah, nice. I really like that. All right, down to number 4, top movies based on books. Mikey Mike.
All right, so surprise, surprise, I've got another sort of young book, like a sort of a children's book here. I picked this one, though, because it's different. I think only one person on here will know this one, only because funny that Andrew recommended the last book on his to me. this is one I had recommended to him to watch. So I'm going to show you the book here first. So the book is Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick. It's like a junior novel, right? But you look at it, it's super fat. You're thinking, holy, who's reading that in grade 4 or 5? But it's Brian Selznick has this knack for writing these books where half of the book is illustrations, and really, really good illustrations. He started off as an illustrator, and so like all of his books are half illustrations and half text. So it's like 600 pages, but it's not really, right? So I was fascinated by this book though, because like most of his, they all have sort of a hook, and in this one, it's about two children who have a disability. The one's deaf in one ear and one's completely deaf, and it's not really about that, but it's about the two of them, and they live 50 years apart, and half of the book is a boy's story that's all in text, and the other half is the girl's, and it's all in pictures. And then at a certain point, there's some sort of interweaving, and it's just wonderfully done, to the point where I was like, when I found out they made a movie out of this, I went, how the hell are they doing this as a film, and will it be good? And as the teacher of me, will it be good enough to show to the kids? You know what I mean? And will it be age appropriate, etc.? And so this movie I heard was getting made, and then it just disappeared. Like I heard it was getting made, and then it was gone. And it was one of those premieres in New York, and that's it kind of deals. And the reason for that is it came out in 2017. The same year, another hugely successful book with the name Wonder in the title came out.
Yeah.
The movie Wonder came out in 2017. The books might have been written in different years, but both were made, both with the title Wonder in them, and it got all the play. It was also about a child that had a disability. And so it was like, all these parallels, and like, of course, the one I want to see gets sort of brushed aside. It was produced by Amazon Studios, so that could have been the reason. That just didn't get a lot of play. So I found it one time. Okay, so I found it on DVD, and I said, okay, I'll buy it. It's the only way I'm going to get to see it. I'll buy it. I'll put it on. We'll see what we got here. And I couldn't believe it. It was like a masterpiece. Now, I recommended this to Andrew at one point, and he watched it, so we can kind of attest to it. But the way they filmed this and stayed true to the book, and Brian Selznick wrote the screenplay too, which definitely helped. But they definitely, they were sort of handcuffed from the start, because you've got a story about two kids who are deaf. And so a lot of the film is silent. You've got her story back in the 20s, which black and white, with a lot of sort of Peter and the Wolf kind of sounds to sort of show what's happening, danger and such. And then you've got his story that takes place in the 70s, so you got some upbeat music and stuff. But there are large chunks, 20 minutes at a time, with no dialogue at all. And it's just, it pulls you. It keeps you, hooked, wondering what's going to happen next and how are they going to intertwine these stories. And there are a couple big names attached to it. It's very small parts they play. Julianne Moore's actually in it. And so is Michelle Williams. So they have these small little parts, just enough to say, there's a name, that you know. Todd Haynes is the director, but man, if it isn't beautiful, and the music, and you get sitting there on these quiet parts, just listening to the sort of the orchestra or the sounds that they use, and it's just, I don't know, it's gorgeous. So that's my number 4, Wonderstruck.
That sounds
cool. It's amazing. This super visual, like it's very visual, and so like it like Mike said, it's a lot of silent and just plays on the music, but just the visual tells a story. You don't need a lot of dialogue, because what's going on. You can tell what's going on by what's happening on the screen. So I'll say it was amazing.
One last thing there that I just forgot to mention was what I really appreciated about it was you see a lot of kids' books get made into films, and they're very it's a kids' film. This is a kids' film that didn't devalue kids' opinions and thoughts. They didn't play down to the lowest common denominator. They said, here's the story. Here it is. Kids will get this, right? And it's just, it's gorgeous, right? And I would, 10, 11, 12-year-olds would really
almost what like Bridge to Terabithia did with like death.
Oh my gosh!
You know what I mean? Where they went like
that movie crushed me.
Hey kids, guess what? Your friends will die.
Yeah.
And you're like, but here, and that's almost sounds like what you're describing. Almost like, let's not sugarcoat almost the reality.
It's
fantastic.
I mean, at its base, it's a premise of the boy is off to try and find his father, and the girl's trying to discover who she is. So it is a voyage of self-discovery, basically. And it's just the kids carrying the whole film. These two kids. So
wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Put that on the list for when the kids are a little older.
Well, I showed it to mine, and she's 9. So, I read it. We've read it, and I showed it to her. So yours would get it. I know they would.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Put that on the list for now, then.
Mm-hmm.
Going over to Matthew. Yeah, that list is getting long. Matthew, what do you got in your number 4, my friend?
My number 4, I picked a movie that comes from a major film series and book series. My number 4 is Casino Royale, 2006. Now, adapted from the James Bond, Ian Fleming written novel of the same name, Casino Royale. Mm-hmm. This is actually the 3rd adaptation of that book to come out. In the late 50s, there was a TV movie that I guess for the time didn't do very well. I've seen it and it's not bad. And then in 1962, they tried to do it again. 1962 is when Dr. No came out and the Sean Connery stretch of film started. In 1967, competing studio wanted to adapt Casino Royale, and it was an absolute failure, bomb, comedy, parody. It's garbage. Eon Productions, which is who make the movies that make the good James Bond movies, they finally got the rights back to Casino Royale in the early 2000s, and they got to make Casino Royale in 2006. Now, obviously, they had to update it because the book came out in 58, so they made it much more fast-paced than the book is. They changed Bond's card game from Baccarat, which is in the book. They put poker in the movie, because it's a huge success all over the world.
Yeah.
But the main plot points are from the book are all in the movie. He has to stop Le Chiffre is the villain, and
that's French for the number. By the way, I just wanted to.
I thought it was the lion.
The lion.
What's French for the lion?
Le lion.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I get. Well, in the book, he's nicknamed the lion.
Ah, see, fun little adaptation fact. Le chiffre just means the number, and because it's Baccarat, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
So in the book and movie, Le Chiffre gets his hands on a whole bunch of money. He invests it poorly and loses it all. And to get it back before his loaners get a hold of him, he has to set up a card game and try to win the money back. James Bond enters, wins the game, and then Le Chiffre tries to torture the information of where he has the money out of him. A great scene in the movie is that torture scene where Le Chiffre cuts out the bottom of a chair, takes a rope, knot it all up, and just hits him from underneath. And that's from the book. And there was a conversation before they were making the movie. It's like, do we keep this or take it out? It's like, no, let's keep it.
How do you describe that in word? Like just
don't.
Seeing it, you go, okay. How do you describe that in words? Right?
Well, yeah. Well, you can describe it as humorous because James Bond is still on point with the one-liners in that scene.
Yeah,
true.
But Casino Royale really sprung new life into the film series, and it's probably considered by some to be their favorite James Bond movie.
So does that make your list because it's your favorite of the Bond for film or your favorite of the Bond books? I have read. I like most of all of the James Bond movies. I like some are better than others. This one is, top 5 for sure. But I picked it because the adaptation is much closer than any of the other books.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
So awesome. It's funny you bring it up. I wanted so hard to put Casino Royale on my list. I did the half of the audiobook this week. It's read by Dan Stevens and it's great. But man, I tried to do Fleming's writing before. I do not like Fleming's writing. I do not like the start of Casino Royale. I'm like, this is brutal. I made it like an hour and a half in, and it's like 9 hours. So I'm like, I don't know. And I took it off because I couldn't get through the book. So I never got it done. But I don't know. I found Fleming's writing. I just had a tough time with his on Casino Royale. So I don't know. That was the audiobook, but I couldn't put it on mine. But the movie's fantastic, and he's obviously a legend for it.
Like a great to me. I've always been a big. No, that's not true. I joined into the whole James Bond thing from basically Pierce Brosnan on, right? That to me, I latched on there and tried. Mike, you'll understand this. Tried watching the old movies. I think we said this before, and it was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. But all the new stuff. But then I was like, what's fascinating is that I was really the gadget over the top demographic that that got me, but I wasn't mad when they rebooted that and went, it's a gun. That's it. This is what else did you want? Right? They give him a gun and they say, that's it. What do you expect? A bunch of gadgets and watches, the watch tells time. Right. And I'm I like that. And I think it was a good launch, relaunch into the James Bond world is what I was trying to say. Yeah, great choice. Excellent. I hate when I have an argument to say about the Matthews thing, and then it's my turn because it's just, hey, look, guys, go. And then it's me again, and now I didn't have time to look at and remember my list, but yes, of course. After Gone Girl, in the books that I was like, yeah, that's it. That's a movie I'd like to read, but I think. This one, I like the movie. I think this one is based on as a matter of fact, a short story. So I'd probably be more likely to read it. It's Shawshank Redemption. There you go. So that's a great movie, and it's one of those movies another movie that almost made my list but fell off. That as soon as it's on TV. You see it and you're like, oh, I'll just watch 5 minutes of this. Good luck. you're watching the rest of this movie. you're watching it. Shawshank was like that. And so it's based, if I'm not mistaken, on a Stephen King short story, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's
Rita Hayworth. And yeah.
Might be from this book right here.
Maybe from that book right there, possibly. Well, I'll keep what I have to say short about it. No, I'm kidding. No, to me, the movie's great. It has a cool angle. It has that. I don't know. I've always I seem to have an attraction to jail themes too, because I love the show Oz, and I love these depictions of jail that are sort of more serious and really show the reality. And this shows the psychological reality. And I'm that guy. If I were to, guilty or not, if I was to go to jail, I'd be like him. I gotta get out, man. I have got to get out, or else it's that, or it's not gonna go well for me. And so I feel that desperation in him. And so you watch, you cheer for him, and you're like, now I don't give a shit if you killed him. At that point, it doesn't matter if that happened or not. You're like, I hope the best for this guy. And of course, you've got, your great Morgan Freeman in there, and the warden's great. The whole music scene, that's my favorite. It's when he locks the door and puts on the record and just blasts it out. It's just fabulous. So yeah, Shawshank Redemption. That's my number 4.
So I may or may not have recently watched that, and that music scene made me laugh because I'm watching it and I remembered it differently, years ago watching it, and I'm like, because it was right after he got all the delivery of books that he had been writing away for, right? And I know kind of why he did it, but it was just comical because he got this thing he really, really wanted, and then he locked the door and started playing music and pissed them all off. And I'm like, it's kind of a weird scene, but it's funny.
He's like, listen, I'm gonna be locked away. I've got my books. I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's also good.
Also has one of the scenes that I cannot make it through without tearing up, and it's the Brooke scene where Brooke gets out.
Unbelievable in that whole movie.
And gets out and ends up hanging himself in the thing because he is so adapted to life in prison that he can't survive outside of prison anymore, because that he's been in prison so long that is now his life, and he can't survive.
His community.
And
you took him away from his community.
and he was an important man. He was an important man in prison, and now he's a grocery clerk.
Yeah,
And like that scene, it literally every time on that scene, I can't help it. I just start watering up.
Example of filmmaker's choice, because that does not happen in the book at all.
No, of course,
So
yeah. Well, I mean, most of that stuff doesn't, right? Because it's
Brooks in the book has about this big a part. He does get out. He does work somewhere, and he just basically sort of just dies an old man. But that scene is so amazing, so powerful.
It's incredible.
There's a great example of why that is on that list, right, François? Because it's like making good choices, right? Add a little something, but do it if it adds to the story. And that's
and it builds up the importance of or the fragility of Andy getting out. You know what I mean? It's like you want to get out, man, but like, look at what happened to this guy that got out. You know what I mean? Like,
and then when he sees,
for him, you know,
when he sees it too, he sees the Brooks was here on the band.
So was Red. That's I write that everywhere I can.
That was Red, not Andy.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Inside the cool bus, I wrote Brooks was here, so was Red.
So was Red,
That's awesome.
So great. All right, let's keep going with your number 4. We are down to Professor AB. What you got for us, man?
Okay, so my next movie is also from 2012, and this one is a little strange one because it was written by the director, who was the author went on to direct it, and that is Stephen Chbosky.
Being a wallflower.
Perks of Being a Wallflower from 2012. This book I read pretty much. The book came out in the early 2000s, and the movie didn't come out to 2012. But I read it fairly early on, and it's a YA book. Like, it's a young adult book, and it deals with a kid that's in high school. But this book really got to me, and early on in the book, there's a line in it. I think it's within the first 2 chapters, and I read it and I kept reading the same line over and over because it made me realize that was true for my life. And so I'm gonna read it for you guys because it's one of my favorite quotes from a book, and it says, "So this is my life, and I want you to know that I'm both happy and sad, and I'm still trying to figure out how that could be." And when I read that, and it just struck me like a bolt of lightning because I was like, that's what I've like lived my whole life, is like I had this mixture of happiness and sadness all the time. And so the book deals with this kid who has some issues. He has some mental health issues, and it kind of unfolds as the book, and same with the movie. The movie is basically exactly like the book for the most part. They leave a few things out. And so he goes into high school, and kind of a loner kid who has some issues, and he starts making friends. And to me, like, the book and the movie is about finding the people who can understand you and still want to be around you. They fully understand who you are as a person, your flaws, and your the troubles you have in life, and they still want to be around you, and finding your tribe. And there's a lot more involved in the book, and also in the movie. Deals with a whole ton of issues that teens and young adults and even grown up or adults deal with. And both movie and the book are both powerful stuff. I love it. I just watched it the other night and just got right into it. It's really well cast.
I'm so happy you put it on your list because I couldn't get it on mine. I love that.
I thought you were. I thought for sure you were going to put it on there.
I get to talk about it. This is great.
Yeah.
It's such a good
and like it's so well cast. Emma Watson's in it, and
debut.
Yes, Ezra Miller, and he is. I don't like Ezra Miller, but he is awesome in this.
So
like, he is
Oscar
perfect
buzz for him when it came out. I remember. I didn't know who
he's
was.
Perfect. He's literally perfect as that role. Like, it was one of those things where when I was reading it, I had this picture in my mind of that character, and when he played it on screen, I was like, "That's that guy." Like, I wasn't. There was no disconnect there. I was like, "Yeah, that is what I pictured in my head." So fantastic.
Seeing Watson do that role was what
after Harry Potter.
Yeah, kind of helped me go, okay, especially compared to like Radcliffe and Grant. She can act. Like, this isn't a one trick thing. She's gonna be fine. Like that was so good. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Perks of being a wallflower. All right, cool. Talented Mr. Despins. That's too long. Make your name shorter.
It is so funny you bring up that maybe how your number 4 is all about finding the people and showing your true self, because my number 4 is the same, but it's the sadistic version that if they find out too much, you must kill them. Because my number 4 is based on the 1955 novel by Patricia Highsmith, and it is The Talented Mr. Ripley. I read this movie.
There you go.
Awesome.
I read this book rather around the time I think in high school we had to do like Catcher in the Rye and stuff, and I hated that. I thought that was brutal. And then we did Talented Mr. Ripley, which is a similar kind of like finding. It's very dark, very sadistic, but again, I was really into like American Psycho at the time and stuff, and it's funny that your quote resonates so much with you, because in a weird way, the quote from Talented Mr. Ripley, I've always thought it'd be better to be a fake somebody than a real nobody, kind of resonates with me. So I get where he's coming from. But there's just, I rewatched this movie again, and there's just, it ages awesomely. And like, there's a few other Ripley roles. I know Barry Pepper plays them, but for me, it's my Tom Ripley is Matt Damon. And there's what a cast this was for 1999. You have Jude Law as like the American socialite, and Gwyneth Paltrow, and Phil Hoffman. Tommy, how's the peeping, Tommy? How's the peeping? And you just have all these other people, and Jack Davenport pops up at the end, and they introduce Cate Blanchett's character, so she's not in the book, but she adds so much more, and we're going to talk about that in just a quick sec. But there's just, like I said, that whole film, and it's all about just this, he really wants to succeed. He really wants this class. Tom Ripley will do anything it takes to be somebody, and as it goes, he builds this multi-layered house of cards, and as soon as one falls, he replaces it, and he's spinning 10 plates, and ultimately it involves in murder and covering up and stolen identity, and he becomes this con artist, conning his way through to get this money without really working on it, and people are calling him out on it, but he's so lovable and charming and dorky. And there's just bits of the movie and how much Matt Damon wants to be like Jude Law's character. And there's parts where when he takes his glasses off and he compares Jude Law to Clark Kent and Superman, and as Tom Ripley's pretending to be Dickie, his glasses are off, and there's this phenomenal scene that once he has to evade the cops and go back as Tom, he puts the glasses on, and you're just like, wow, that's something that you don't convey in the book that the movie does well. And the ending, it's the same kind of thing. And the ending is so tragic when there's the one person that really knows about him. And he says to Peter, tell me about Tom Ripley, and he's talented and all this. He's crushing me. And as that's going on, Matt Damon as Tom is going back to his cabin, and the doors, he's talking about the darkness inside of him, and the doors start closing, and the mirror has the two reflections, and then it closes to black. And that's not in the book. The book ends, he's on the boat and he gets away, but the movie kind of adds this little epilogue to it. And that's just an incredible metaphor for it, because he's just being consumed by his demons. And that's the kind of characters I really empathize with. There's just so much I like about the movie. I love how sadistic, dark, homoerotically charged it is, and it's just together. It's a great movie. My number 4, Talented Mr. Ripley.
Nice.
Great.
All right. Inspiring your name and everything. The Talented Mr. Ripley.
That's it.
I think that was a school assigned book.
No, it was around the time like we read Catcher in the Rye, and I was looking for some more like those coming of age books.
Yeah.
And then I just stumbled upon, and I read it out, and then the movie came out, so I watched it, but I didn't like it at the time. But because I had read the book, I qualified, and I love the movie.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here we go. Number 3. I won't spend too much time on it because it is this handy dandy film right here, Shawshank Redemption. I'll just point out a couple things that I agreed on with François and a couple changes they made that for the better or the worse. But I was going to say exactly what you said, François. Talk about a good snapshot of a film about institutionalization in the prison system. Even though it takes place, in like the late 40s into the 60s, it's still just a perfect snapshot of sort of what goes on and sort of that quote of they keep you till you're all used up kind of thing. And that's sort of what Brooks was representing and when he got sent away. But as far as the film's concerned, what I love about it is some of the choices they made. such as like Red, of course, Morgan Freeman, we all know. But the original Red is named Red because he's got red hair and he's Irish. So there's your choice right off the bat.
Yeah.
Red. The whole story, like if you listen to the audiobook or read the book or whatever, it's all Red telling the story, right? Andy is just being told about from Red, right? The whole thing's narration. So it all hinged on finding the right guy, and boy, did they ever, right? If you don't, I think if you don't have Morgan Freeman in that role narrating that film, you might have a different film, right?
It would have had the tone would have been not as. He's got a calming sort of voice, which is important for Red.
I don't know who you replace there. But anyways, so that is one for the positive. A couple changes they made, not huge things, but they did make the warden a little rougher, a little more shady. They also didn't show a lot of other wardens coming in and going, and a lot of the guards coming and going. They kept the same ones, but that's to keep you attached to them. But they made the warden a little shadier, like he kills off the Tommy guy because he's going to help Andy, show his innocence and stuff. That doesn't happen in the book. And Andy makes him a fake ID so he can money launder. That doesn't really happen in the book. But I see why they made some of those choices so that you really hate this guy. And so later Andy can take that identity when he leaves. So those I don't mind. There's only really one thing I'll say that I wish they kind of hadn't done. And it's that very last scene, spoiler alert, but that very last scene after, Red gets out and Andy's out and he's going to go find him, right? And he goes to the wall and he finds the stone. And all that's fine. That's pretty close to the book. But that last scene where they show Red get to the beach in Zanatnaweo, I think is how it's pronounced. And he sees Andy and they're at the boat there and they kind of wave. And like, I wish they had left that last scene out, because in the book, it's sort of, you assume he's going to find him. You assume they're going to meet up again. Don't show me it. Let me imply what I want to imply. Yeah. That one little thing, I mean, it doesn't ruin it or anything, but it's kind of like, oh, I wish they could just
that sounds like a studio direction, from a naive producer's like, they're not gonna get it. And I'm like, no, we're gonna get it.
But 100%. I mean, I could listen to that. And you talk about a short story. It's funny you said, François, I might pick this one up and read it. It's a short story. It's a Stephen King short story. It's the same length as most books.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's about, I mean, if you audiobooked it, it's still about 4 hours. It's like 3.5 to 4 hours.
Wow. Yeah.
But I mean, still, all of his not all, but some of his best movies, in my opinion, are his short stories or his topics that are not horror related. Like you look at The Body, which was Stand By Me. You look at this one,
Green Mile,
Shawshank. Yeah, all of those that are non-horror. It doesn't mean some of his horrors are bad. It's just the man can write. There's no doubt.
Yeah. My good friend, Andy Dufresne.
Is the rehabilitation scene? What is rehabilitation? Are you rehabilitated? I love that scene.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know what the fuck rehabilitated is. And they stamp it. And you're just like, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm like, that's my favorite scene of the movie.
Yeah.
Good one. All right, number 3. We're down to number 3. What do we got, Matthew?
For my number 3, I picked a movie that I really love, and then thankfully read the book that the movie is based on sometime last year. So I was like, great, it qualifies, because there are so many movies that I love that I haven't read the book of, and maybe never will. But thankfully, I read this. I'm just gonna say read because it was actually the audiobook.
Yeah,
and it's great because at my job, I have my headphones on and I can get through a book in 2 days.
Nice.
My number 3 is Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Cool. Yes, sir.
Now, the book, there's a lot of differences between the movie and the book. And to say that the movie is better than the book is not, I mean, people could say the book is better than the movie's better than the book. I really love the movie. So when I decided I was going to read, I'm going to continue to use the word read.
Yeah.
When I decided I was going to read the book, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to enjoy it because there are changes or differences. And it's almost, there's the differences are like, there are additional characters in the book. People you love in the movie die in the book, but it's really like, alternate. It's because the story is the same. They get to the island of inhabited by dinosaurs. The dinosaurs get out and they have to save themselves. And it's easy to make a movie out of a simple concept like that. The differences I do like in the book are the first few chapters. It starts off with kind of like a small history about DNA and genetic coding and engineering and stuff, and then it gets into short stories about smaller dinosaurs already getting off the island, workers getting hurt on the island and having to be transported to a hospital, and you get a doctor's story about what does raptor mean, and that and then the Spanish woman next to her is like, oh, raptor, that's the spirit that steals babies in the night. And it's like, and then she discovers, she finds like a dictionary, and the first definition is something along those lines, and then the second one is bird of prey, but it's still not associated with dinosaur yet. And then there's the next story is about the girl on the beach who gets injured by the small compy dinosaurs, which they use for the Lost World, and a character, Dr. Gutierrez, which is probably my favorite character who's not in the movie. And while I was listening to the book, I was like, oh, I would love if they brought this character into like the next Jurassic World movie and they got Oscar Isaac to play him, because he would be perfect. It's terrific.
It's Oscar Isaac. It's Oscar Isaac. You're probably not wrong.
And he finds the remains of a small dinosaur, and can't identify it. He's expert on reptiles of Caribbean islands and stuff like that. Ooh, all right. Where am I going with this? Anyways, I love the movie. I like the book. And I think there are a few things in the book they could add for the next movie, and probably could, raise the bar a little bit, because those last two were stinkers.
We're great. What?
They suck.
They were great.
What?
Can you hear me again, Scott?
World. I love Fallen Kingdom.
They're awful.
Wow.
That's great.
They're terrible.
I haven't seen any of them.
No, that's the thing. I was gonna really squeeze it. I'm like, I really want to put Jurassic Park, but then I'm like, I've never read it. I'm not gonna cram the audiobook in like the day before just to put it on. Like,
right.
So I'm glad that you read it last year, so we can talk about it.
Is it true
Yep.
that like Hammond and like some of the like Malcolm they die in the book?
Yeah, both of them die in the book.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
Do they wear black and white in the book, or is that a Spielberg choice?
Well, I think black is really Jeff Goldblum choice.
Yeah. Well, I always took it as like faith versus science, but I just didn't know.
Oh,
it was
sure.
Like that in the book.
Yeah.
They're contrasting.
Movies being a much more visual medium.
See,
It's
I've always
probably
thought
that
that was
exactly.
a Spielberg, choice, and I've always liked that more.
And it's interesting because they kill off Malcolm in the first book, but he comes back for the second
Life finds
one.
away.
Yeah, he's in the second book.
Goldblum
breathing and
finds
helping.
away. Parlay his fame.
Life.
It's interesting because
Get a paycheck.
I do remember like the paragraph or the few sentences. Grant talks to another character and he asks, "How's Malcolm doing?" And then that character just is described as looks down and with has a solemn look on his face. So I don't remember them saying Malcolm's dead.
Sure.
But it just doesn't look good for him.
They cloned him. They cloned him
That could
on
be
the
it.
island.
That would be great.
And that's a Malcolm clone.
Yeah. And that's Malcolm Park. Welcome. Welcome to Malcolm
Who wants
Park.
to be on a deserted
That's Goldblum,
island
the
with
world
a
of
dozen
Goldblum,
Jeff
Goldblum is
Goldblums?
the
Yeah.
spin-off.
This guy.
All
I'm in.
different versions of Goldblums everywhere. Everywhere.
Goldblum.
Goldblum, Goldblum.
Schmugglers.
All right. What are we on? 3?
Yep.
3.
Oh, man. Well, have I got a book for you?
Oh,
And I
geez.
wouldn't know.
Yeah, you
But
know.
I wouldn't know. But I am curious. It was hard. I'm still at this time. 2 and 3 are doing this right now, and I'm gonna go ahead and settle. Because one I know would be a better book. The other one, I'm just curious to see what it's like. But I did like one movie. Okay, I'm gonna go with this. Number 3 is adaptation.
Oh.
Yeah, so Adaptation is a weird ass movie that a lot of people hate, and for some reason I love it. We've talked about it before. I'm bringing it back because it is based on a book by Susan Orlean, and it's called The Orchid Thief. The Orchid Thief.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the movie is about Charlie Kaufman adapting that book into a movie, but the movie is an adaptation of that. It doesn't make any sense.
He writes himself into it.
But then on top of it, in the movie, Nick Cage plays Charlie Kaufman, who actually wrote the movie. And in the movie, Charlie Kaufman has a twin brother called Donald Kaufman, who's also played by Nick Cage, who doesn't exist. It's not a real person. But the movie, if you look it up on IMDb, is written by Charlie and Donald Kaufman. You can see why I like this movie. My favorite thing about this movie is how at the beginning he's trying to talk to his agent about how he's going to do this, and he's having a hard time, and he's pretty much talking the way I'm doing it right now, and he's losing his shit in this restaurant because he doesn't know how he's going to do it, and he's like, I don't want this to be a typical movie with drugs and violence and murder. And in the end, the whole movie, just as the movie unfurls, all of these things end up taking place. And so it's almost like the inevitable meets the, you know what I mean? And it's just such a great movie. And I'd be like, I know the book's not going to be that interesting. Because
the book is just like, you know, there's 4 or 5 pages of text and then it's just blank. And then you have to write the rest yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
the book is basically the love story part, apparently, and it has to do with orchids and stuff. And it has to do with the love story part, but it doesn't have anything to do with the guy trying to write the movie. You know, so I think it was like it was a stepping stone for Charlie Kaufman for Synecdoche or whatever that was, Schenectady or whatever.
Confusing movie.
Oh my god, I saw that in theaters.
I think we did too, right?
I saw it somewhere. I blacked out halfway through. I don't know.
But I mean, the whole thing makes sense, but then you reach a point you're like, why and how deep? You know, it's like, well, why is this happening? But Adaptation, like, was that one step before that, like, that made it a really great, you know, really great, interesting movie. And I only on the list because I'd be curious to see, because first of all, the whole book is about adaptation, which is the theme of the show. But also I'd be curious to see what the Orchid Thief is about, like, and how lightly it compares and what gave Charlie Kaufman such nightmares that he wrote Adaptation.
Next Mack Flash show, if François reads us Adaptation.
Why not?
Why not? On Mondays.
Yeah.
Fireside chat, read a chapter.
Be great. AB, what do you got coming in for us?
So we're getting into my top 3, as they usually are. Could kind of be interchangeable. I could put any of these at the top, and I love all 3 of these. But I put this one here. I'm glad I did because I'm going to piggyback off of stuff that you guys were talking about. In 1996, my favorite author wrote a book in 6 different parts, and they're released month to month starting in February, and end up being the last one was in August. And I bought all these separately, and I read them all separately and had to wait for the next one to come out to carry on the story. And it had me hooked right off the very first one. And so that book was adapted into a movie, which was directed by a person we've already talked about, who directed a movie that you guys have talked about. This is from 1999, directed by Frank Darabont, who also directed Shawshank, and that is The Green Mile. There are the 6 books there.
Good old Stephen King.
Good one.
That's my guy. And so I at first, when this came up, I was like, okay, do I put Shawshank? Do I put Green Mile? And like we talked about Shawshank, even though it is a bigger short story, it is still a short story for me. And so this one, when I read it, It got optioned pretty much right away. Came out in '96. It got optioned and made in '99, and they attached Tom Hanks to it. So I was like, okay, here we go, right off the bat. When I saw it in theater, like I said for an earlier book there, when I watched it, they knocked it out of the park with casting, because every single person in there, it was like exactly in my mind as I was reading it, those characters. And I mean, obviously Michael Clark Duncan, just phenomenal performance, and like he did exactly what I thought. I was John Coffey. Tom Hanks is being Tom Hanks, but he was awesome. But one of the big ones for me was David Morse, who plays Brutal. I'm sure he's been in a bunch of different stuff that you recognize. Real tall guy, big guy, but he killed it. And it was one of my first times I ever saw Sam Rockwell in the movie, and he plays Billy the Kid, and he gave exactly the performance that I envisioned Billy the Kid, and just nailed it. For me, this is one of the closest adaptations to one of Stephen King's books, and I've always said for years now that if you want a perfect Stephen King adaptation, get my man Frank Darabont to make your movie, because everyone else is pretty much terrible, and he has made 3 that knock it out of the park.
Those are great. Like, what are they? Pretty much terrible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a ton. There's been so many adaptations of his stuff over the years, and they're all they're not all like, they go from like not great to really bad. And so Frank Darabont has done Shawshank, he's done Green Mile, and he's done The Mist. And all 3 of those are bangers. I love all 3 of those movies, and I think they're great. Stephen King, he just really I think he really understands Stephen King, and really understands like that on how he builds a story and how he builds his characters. That Stephen King's books aren't exactly always about the plot; it's all about character development and you investing in these characters. And I think that he really nails it. But I listened to The Green Mile this week on an audiobook, and I watched the movie, and like it's bang on. Like, it's really bang on. And the one thing I will say for it is it's a kind of PG it down a bit. The book is obviously Stephen King, so it's a lot more crude and a lot more horror stuff. Like, there's the scene with the botched execution, or the electric chair execution, and it's an awful scene, but in the book it's like super gruesome, like horror story gruesome. But I mean, they did a great job. Like I said, they want this, and I mean, this was a critically acclaimed movie, so obviously they're not going to go over the top like horror wise for this, because it would be terrible for it. But yeah, Green Mile, love it.
I'm glad you put that on only also for the 6. I know the 6-month thing, so that's a little bit more special, because I can imagine you were excited each month to see almost like a comic book.
Man, I couldn't wait.
Like you said, a comic book, right?
Yeah. It's wild. In the Telling Mr. Ripley, I was looking back at the 2000 Academy Awards, and that Best Supporting Actor was like Cruz for Magnolia, Michael Clark Duncan, who probably should have won, Jude Law, and Haley Joel Osment, and then the winner was Michael Caine. And I'm like, that's a heavy list. So I stumbled upon that too, like yesterday, looking at that. But ton of Oscar noms. Green Mile is a great pick.
Yeah,
love it.
I like that movie. It's really good, and it's got that like unexpected supernatural element to it all of a sudden. You know, like it starts off very normal, and then suddenly you're like, what? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, there's like weird stuff in this movie. This is gonna be great. Yeah, this is gonna be awesome. I really enjoy that. Awesome. Anybody else got anything to say about The Green Mile?
I'll talk about it in a couple. No, I'm just joking.
When I was watching it the other night, he pops up and he's in this scene for like literally 2 minutes. I was like, top biller Gary Sinise right there.
Oh yeah,
99 Sinise, man, 20 mil paycheck.
Oh my god, that's great. Scott, what do you got for us coming in at? What are we at? Number 3.
Number 3. So as I said, so what really excites me is when I hear that my favorite actor or a director is going to be adapting a film, I go out and I read the book. And that's exactly what happened. 2010, when I heard for Ben Affleck was directing his follow-up to Gone Baby Gone that I loved and putting himself in it. And I read, written by Chuck Hogan, Prince of Thieves, which was then adapted to The Town. So my number 3 is Ben Affleck's The Town.
I like that movie.
Yeah. So that book maintains a lot. It's pretty similar throughout. They rob Fenway, all that stuff. They consolidate one character. They split him off into 2, and that's where you get the Redder character. And then otherwise, the only other main difference, which I think is better that they dropped, is there's a stupid love triangle in the book with Rebecca Hall's character, Affleck, and John Hamm's detective. And then they have like a weird love triangle. So not only is it like Heat, but it's Heat with this romance, and that's so stupid. Affleck and the screenwriters rightly cut that out, and they streamlined just kind of a badass crime caper thriller. And again, it's just a movie that's books and movies are fun, and I had a fun time no matter what during that. So like I said, Affleck's follow-up put himself in it. He plays a great character, a flawed character, somebody who's kind of struggling to get out of Charleston, where he's from, where all these criminals come from in South Boston. And his dad's a career criminal, Chris Cooper. He's just sucked into life, but he wants to be more. John Hamm, who at that time was off Mad Men and should be a movie star. I just love that John Hamm plays the detective. It's such a great casting. And then again, you get Renner, who got an Oscar nom for his role, scene stealing throughout the whole thing. And again, it's a pulse pounding movie that's going to like adapt a lot of Michael Mann. That whole homage is from the armored truck scene is all an homage to Heat, which funny enough, that was changed from the book too. Because in the book, they shoot up a movie theater. And I'm like, you know what? I can't imagine studios would sign off on them robbing and shooting up a movie theater while you're in the movie theater watching it. So they
especially not in the climate that it was around in the last year.
So they changed it to an armored truck, and it's such a good scene. It rivals Heat in every way. And that's just Affleck's directing. And that's my guy. So I had an awesome time reading the book, Prince of Thieves, and a great time no matter when The Town is on. So like I said, just my number 3 is The Town. It's a
great movie. I just watched it for the first time, like, I don't know, in the last year, I'd say. Let's call it that. And, it'd been like attractive, and it seemed like I like a good caper and stuff. And like, great ride. Just a great ride the whole way. Jeremy Renner is just unhinged.
Oh, whose car are we taking is an unbelievable quote. Yeah. But then it's just cool stuff. They shoot in Fenway, and it's Affleck, and he's pulling his Boston weight around. And it's cool when you hear all those people, like the extras are all like Boston and Charleston residents that he got like SAG cards for, so they got a paycheck to do it. And I'm like, man, that's just cool. It's just little things. Like I said, when you dive into these tidbits on movies, and that's what books and movies are for.
Adds a little bit of that realism to it. It
is. Yeah. We'll take back. I forget what other one. Very Hollywood ending in the fact he dies in the book and he gets away in the movie and sends her the letter in like the orange garden and stuff. And in the book, he just goes to her house and dies on the step. And then you're just like, fucking Affleck was like, no, I'm the hero. No. I'm surviving this movie.
Not dying on screen.
Yeah, I'm not dying on the step.
That's great. All right, let's dive into our top two. We've got some awesome movies so far. I can't imagine what's in the top 2.
Okay, so here we go. This one is probably out of all the ones I've listed and everyone else listed is probably the oldest one. One I read longest to go. Grade 12 ISU, we had these independent study projects. You got to finally pick your own book, and you didn't have to do the book the teacher told you to do, which was a big deal. We had to pick 2 books, and we got a huge list of books we could pick from. So my whole goal was to find the 2 most messed up books on this list, and I was going to read them. And one was Fahrenheit 451, which has had several different adaptations and treatments, none worthy of this conversation, even though I know your boy Michael B's in one.
The Michael B. Jordan one's sick.
But the other one on the list that I chose was Anthony Burgess, Clockwork Orange.
I knew it.
Oh, yeah.
I knew it.
Which, oh my gosh. Insane. Oh my gosh. When you are in grade 12, and you're like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it by myself, and there will be no one else in this class doing it to me. Oh, wait, and I have to tell the whole class what happened in this book afterwards? I kind of regretted the choice originally, since the book itself is written in something called Nadsat, which is like this Russian influenced English. So like it takes you it's not a very long book. It's probably about 150 pages, something like that. It takes you probably the first 20 pages or so to figure out what things mean. Like the Gulliver is the head, and like there's all these different terms for things. And it takes you quite a while to get in. So I recently reread this knowing we were doing this because I wanted to see how easy it was to get back into it, and as an adult reading it versus, a kid. And it's sort of the same experience, although everything just clicks a little more, makes a lot more sense. And the book is written in 3 parts, 7 chapters each. And the first part of the story is essentially about all the chaos Alex causes. The middle part is all about the Reformation and how they try to change him in some sadistic way. And then the last 7, the last part is sort of the result of what happens. Well, if you didn't know, you guys know, this was directed by an infamous director who does not essentially get along with the authors that he makes the films from. So Stanley Kubrick, right? So this is the sucker here. And so, this was going to have some issues from the get-go. Because, he did, The Shining, and King didn't like that. And he's done pretty much everything he's done. I think Full Metal Jacket, the author, didn't like that. So Burgess did not like Kubrick's take on this. But I will tell you this. I've read, and knowing that full well after, I didn't know that at first. I hadn't seen the movie before I had read it. And then, flash forward to now, I've read the book after seeing the movie. I think Kubrick got this one spot on. Say what you want about what he did with The Shining and other things. I think he got Clockwork Orange spot on. Burgess's big problem with it is that when this book was released in America, they left out the last chapter. So when it got released in America, it had 20 chapters, not 21. So that last part, it was not there. So Kubrick claims, whether true or not, he never had that version. So if you watch the film versus read the book, the film is pretty spot on. I think Andrew could attest this. It's pretty much identical to like the film, close, shot for shot, line for line even, because they use the Nadsat language in the film, right? Yeah. But that last chapter is not in the film. It's completely omitted, which changes the entire tone of the film from what the book was. And so Burgess was not happy with that. But I think, personally, having done both recently, I think it was the right choice, because the last chapter in the book, essentially, if you don't know, him and his buddies cause chaos. Then he gets sort of reformed by being forced to watch all these horrific scenes, and then he gets sick whenever he wants to do all this stuff. Right? That's my Cole's Notes version. So in the movie, though, the very last chapter is omitted, which actually shows Alex just essentially after he gets reformed, and then they reverse it again so that he's normal and wants to do all this damage to people and beat them up and do all these horrible things. In the last chapter of the book, he sort of just all of a sudden kind of decides, no, I think I'm too grown up for this now. I think I need to sort of move on with my life. And like he starts wanting to have a kid and find a wife. And it's like all happens in one chapter right at the end. And he kind of just starts like, nope, I'm done with this. And he's only like 18, I think, at that point. So I'm like, if that was in the film, that would have just ruined the whole thing.
I agree.
Because in the movie, doesn't he because he's incapable of violence, and then he meets the first person, the husband of the lady, and then the husband just has at him, and the guy can't defend himself. Alex can't defend himself, and he ends up succumbing or
you're close. That's close to the end. What happens is they sort of use him for their own purposes against the government, because the government wants to take all the criminals and do this process to them, right? So these people, including this guy you're talking about, they lock him in a room, play Beethoven really loud, so he jumps out the window to kill himself, okay? And then he winds up in the hospital, and they basically, everyone who's against that political party, the government, says, this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this to people, which is correct, and they reverse it. They reverse it. So the film ends with him in bed. He gets to hear his music. They're giving him whatever he wants, and essentially you're implying that, all right, here we go. He's gonna go right back at it, but the credits roll, and you don't know.
He has a dream about the girls and stuff like that, and so like he's like, oh yeah, I was reformed or whatever.
Yeah, so totally would have changed it completely.
Yeah, man, I would not have liked that at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I love that it's basically saying that you can't force someone to be something they're not.
Yeah, the moral dilemma, right? In that whole book is sort of they talk about it. It's a moral religious dilemma, right? Is it better to be able to choose evil or to do bad, or to be forced and have no choice to do good? What's better, right? So it's this huge moral dilemma, right?
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
So there you go. There's number 2.
Great movie. Hard to watch.
Traumatizing. Yeah, horribly traumatizing film.
Yeah.
Hard to watch.
Absolutely.
But, you see it, and if you can sit through the first really hard part, and then you get through the rest of it. The rest is hard, but not in the way you expect it. So, but it's in a better way. It's hard to explain.
No,
Everyone should see it.
Yeah.
Every time I hear singing in the rain, I get flashback.
I knew about that scene probably like 20 years before I saw the movie.
Oh my god!
I saw the movie when I was like 16, and I knew about that scene as a kid. I don't know, but I just always knew about that.
That movie makes Malcolm McDowell, and he makes that movie. Like you can't play any other part without me going, Alex. You are Alex DeLarge. Nope, you are Alex DeLarge.
Yeah. Even movies like I never saw it. I'm not a horror guy. You guys know that. But like when I saw the trailer to a movie like Funny Games, and I was like, oh, like so the extended version of the first scene of Clockwork Orange.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Basically, just that's all it is. It's that scene, just longer, right?
Yeah.
All right, Matthew, what do you got for number 2?
Okay, for my number 2, I wanted to pick. I mentioned it last week. I wanted to pick a graphic novel because several of them and comic books get adapted into movies. Usually, I don't want to. With the exception of the MCU, many comic book movies are usually we'll take the character and then make up our own stupid story about it. Yeah. Maybe they'll keep the origin of the character, but everything else kind of gets made up, and it doesn't work every time. Graphic novels are a different form of comic books,
for sure.
And movies based on graphic novels try to stay closer to the source material. Now, this one is a direct translation. My number 2 is Sin City.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Good one.
Robert Rodriguez wanted to make this movie a while ago, or I think several people want to make this movie, but Frank Miller, the author and creator and holder of the rights, he didn't want to. So Robert Rodriguez just took it upon himself to shoot a short film, and it's used in the movie. It's the Josh Hartnett scene at the beginning, based on The Customer's Always Right, which is it's a series of graphic novels, which is one of those stories. So he films that. It's just a few minutes long, and he sends it to Frank Miller, and he says, if you let me make this movie, this is what it will look like. If you don't want to, fine. Here's a short film you get to show your friends. Well, that, Frank Miller agrees after seeing it, and then they start getting to work. Now, you'll see in the credits and, I think the beginning for sure, and the end credits, there's no written by or screenplay credit because they just take the story and dialogue from the book and put it on screen. They take the panels, the art panels, and just put them on film, but it's with actors and stuff. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, you go through it. They've shortened the stories down through dialogue, and they cut out some violence. They cut out some nudity. They add a little bit of color to certain objects and stuff, but some of that comes back in like the director's cut DVD. But essentially, Robert Rodriguez himself has said, we're not adapting the book. This is another translation of the book. You pick up the book and you watch the movie, you can follow right along. I saw the movie in theaters. It blew me away, and it was terrific. One? Yeah, that's one of them.
Yeah, there's 5 right behind. The other 5 are behind me.
And I was so happy when I saw the movie. I was like, oh, this is what, comic book movies will look like now. It'll just be the panels on screen. You know, that didn't exactly happen except for maybe 2 more. Frank Miller went on his own. Frank Miller went on his own and tried to direct The Spirit, and it didn't work. Number 2, Sin City.
Nice.
I'm so happy you said that. That was one of the most fun I ever had at a theater, like 2005, 6. I went real late, like 11 o'clock show, and I was blown away. One of the most best experiences I ever had at a theater. I went with my buddy Drew.
Really cool.
Sin City.
I've always loved like vignette type stories, you know what I mean? Like when you show like little vignettes, but then like if the vignettes go together and it forms a story, and then stylistic movies, well, you know me, like it's like, you're gonna go all crazy and do something weird. I'm in. I want to see that. So
it was. I guess technically the first movie I saw that would fit the noir genre. And then from that, you go and you do some research, and you research other movies that are of that ilk. And, you know, then I was like, okay, I'll put on Chinatown. It's like, oh, this is great. More movies like this. Voiceover, detective movies are fantastic.
Again, and then same. I'm looking, if you have any really good detective movies, I was just talking, I think we talked about this lately, or something came up, and I was like, I really like detective movies, but I got to have like the right ones, you know what I mean? I think I did try to watch what's the one you just said with Jack Nicholson? Chinatown. And maybe I wasn't ready for it, but I'll try it again. But it's one of those things where I'm like, you know, detective stories are great, and Sin City definitely falls into that category with the voiceover and all that. It's so great. My number 2 is not a film noir, but it is an interesting movie. And I think I only brought it up because I think I've been trying to watch this movie for about a year and a half now. And one of those things where I keep bringing it up and like, I should really watch this again. And just, I never come around to it. And I think mostly it's because my wife's never seen it. So I'm like, oh, we should sit down and watch this, because it's a really good movie that like a lot of people have seen, a lot of people should see. And it's got great themes, great cast. And turns out it's based on a book. And, you know, it fits my description of, I think I would read this book. It's One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest. I think
we might hear that again. We might hear that.
That's hilarious. That movie's I like the base. I like the then what I'll do is, out of respect for those of you who have read the book, I will let you talk about it, and I will just say this: my favorite thing about it is that it starts with the best premise. It sounds like something I would do. A guy who pleads insanity in order to get out of prison.
Well, I was like, it's not a prison; it's work detail. He's like on a work detail, so he doesn't want to do the work detail. He's like, screw working. I'm just gonna act crazy. Yeah,
and it's so great because it's like, what a great idea, except no. And like a lot of things, like a lot of people who go, I think I could get away with murder. I could do it. It's like, no, you couldn't. No, you can't. You can't. No, you can't fake being crazy in an institution, man. Like, you're going to get, and it, as we all know, it does not go well for him.
Sideways. Goes real sideways.
A little bit. And just because of that, and because of that inner conflict, you know, you could see that inner conflict anywhere. And like, as someone who worked, you know, I used to have a job in a cubicle, and it was like every day, go in, do the same thing, go out, and no motivation, no reason to be there, but you still have to do it. And then you try to like sort of like buck the system and go, hey, I noticed these things, like, why do we? And they're like, you know, and they bang you back down to like just do your job and stuff. And you start feeling, so you see a movie like that and you go, man, yeah. No, I get it. Like, you see him fighting and trying to be like, fight for his own, and how they win. And you're like, no, they can't win. They can't, because it's not true. Like, that's the whole thing, is that it's not true. So how can they win if it's not true? And yet they do. And so that movie is just insane. It's infuriating. It's infuriating to watch, and I love it. So that's all I'll say. And I can only look at it from the perspective of the movie. I can't imagine how good the book has to be. So that's it. That's my number 2. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. AB.
Well,
no reaction. Everyone's always so quiet at the end.
I might have something to say about that later on.
Wow.
I might have to say that later on. No, I wish it was actually. Now that I wish it was, but I can't. Honestly, I can't do it.
It's kind of funny that that you guys have to say something about that later, and it's my number 2. So you got to imagine what's my number 1.
Exactly.
It's true.
Right. Okay, go.
Okay. So this is one where I watched the movie first, and then I went back and read the book, and because I was just super curious about how it would be in the book, because I assumed it would be a lot crazier, and I was right. But it's very different. And so the book came out in 1993. The movie was made in 1996. It was directed by Danny Boyle, written by Irvine Welsh, and that is Trainspotting.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So Trainspotting came out. I watched it. It's about a bunch of junkies in Scotland, and it's very much kind of snapshots into the day in life of kind of the scuzzy kind of Scotland, a modern Scotland, a bunch of junkies, a bunch of degenerates, and just kind of like their day-to-day lives of robbing and stealing in order to get money for heroin. And it's got Ewan McGregor, Robert Carlyle, Johnny Lee Miller, and this is another one where Danny Boyle got the characters right in the book. From the book, the book is made up of a bunch of just random stories that Irvine Welsh wrote. A lot of them have the same characters, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them have just random people in there. And so what Danny Boyle did, and I think this is one of the adaptations where I think that what Mike was saying earlier, where it adapted it so well, is that it took a lot of these stories and adapted it to fit a constant storyline, and kind of changed some characters in order to make it a coherent story from beginning to end, and used a lot of the stories that are from the book that basically talk about different characters, but then used it for their within this overall story, and I think it really worked. When I saw this movie, it really blew me away because I'd never really seen anything like that as far as junkies go. It was like introduction into the life of a heroin addict, and it was pretty wild. And so what I like about the book and about the movie is that, and a lot of people really say that it glamorizes drugs and glamorizes heroin. I disagree. I disagree. I think the book is the same way.
The next day I went out and bought 5 grams of heroin. Just fucking started going, man. It was crazy. It's so glamorous.
What I think is I think it skirts that fine line, because of what I've heard the movie described this as that it shows you all the horrors of drug life, of a junkie's life, but never lets you forget that there's a reason why people are doing heroin, is because it's the greatest feeling you'll ever feel in your life. There's a reason why people get addicted to it, and it's not just chemicals. They want to constantly feel that feeling that feels better than anything you could ever imagine. And that's why they're willing to basically throw their lives away to do this drug. And I think that both the movie and the book really do a great justice in that there's a reason why people do drugs, and it's not just because they're scumbags or that they're they're trying to throw, like I said, they're trying to throw their lives away. They want to feel great, and they have a lot of crappy stuff going on in their life they want to escape from.
But don't you think it really shows? It definitely shows the negative side of it, though.
100%. That's what I'm saying.
Holy crap.
The way I see it in correlation with what both of you guys are saying is that basically it says, what price are you willing to pay to how good you're willing to feel? If I eat a little ice cream, I'll be bloated in the morning. If I do a little heroin, I'll shit myself at my girlfriend's house.
Yeah. Well,
what I mean? It's
one of the craziest scenes in there, and it comes up throughout the movie, is they are so high out of their mind they forget to feed their baby, and the baby dies.
I know.
They find the baby dead in the crib because they've neglected it for a week.
Yeah.
You're willing to let your baby die. You're willing to destroy your family.
Glamorize.
It doesn't glamorize
Bullshit.
it at all. It's
Bullshit.
awful.
Yeah, that's
But
awful.
I-
It's terrible.
But I love that movie. I love Danny Boyle. My first introduction to Danny Boyle as well, and the way he does it, the style that he uses is so good. And obviously, that came out as two separate soundtracks. The music for me was banging. Like I love both those soundtracks. I listen to them constantly. So
just because we're talking about top two here and might as well like dwell on it a little bit. What did you see T2? The second one?
I did. I just watched. I saw them. I didn't see it in theater. I missed it in theater, but I watched it recently. But then I watched it this week. I watched Trainspotting and I watched T2.
Related to the book, based on extra stories, just its own.
No, so what it does is there's a second book. Irvine Welsh wrote 3 books based on these characters, and one of them was supposed to be adapted. It's called Porno, and it was the continuing story of these guys. And so they were going to originally adapt it. And so what Danny Boyle wanted to do was he wanted to wait 20 years so that these guys looked old, because the book is 10 years, 20 years in the future. So he wanted to actually make them old. And so they all signed on to do it. It kind of fell apart. And so then it came back on. And so they adapted this screenplay to it. And it contains actually a lot from the first book, Trainspotting. There's a lot of stories that they didn't include. And so it includes some of that. It has... basically, it transforms Spud character into Irvine Welsh. And so you see Spud's character writing out these stories, and it's basically like now he is that guy that's writing out these stories of Trainspotting. Actually, and Irvine Welsh actually plays one of the, like, not main characters, but sub characters. Mikey Forrester, who sells them the suppositories, that's Irvine Welsh, the author, and he pops up again in T2. And I thought that was pretty funny because he plays this kind of like low life in the movies.
But to be clear, everyone, we're not talking about Terminator 2. We're talking about
T2 Trainspotting.
The other T2. The other T2. Yeah.
I watched it. A lot of people bagged on it. I thought it was fantastic, and it really, like, it kind of, like, when you're watching it, 20 years has passed, and you kind of like started evaluating your own life, like, because this movie was 20 years ago. Like, what have you done in the last 20 years? Did you see these characters come back after 20 years?
Yeah.
And some of them have done things. Some of them are exactly where they were 20 years ago. And, like, it really helps you, like, it makes you think about your life. Like, man, what have I done for 20 years? But anyway,
interesting.
T2 is great.
It's great. Number 2, Scott.
Cool. I'm going to pick one mainstream. I feel this is a book we've all read. And it's a movie we've all seen. With this, it ties into the fake somebody is better than being a real nobody. And it's definitely going to be one of the oldest written books, written in 1925. And I'm going with 2013's Baz Luhrmann's directed The Great Gatsby. And I love the story. I love the story of The Great Gatsby. I read it in high school. I read it twice then and again before it came out in 2013. Leo's attached. I love the 1974 version with Robert Redford. So when in high school too, caught me at a perfect time. I'm going back. I'm rewatching a lot of Redford movies. I'm rewatching The Sting and loving it. And I'm just loving his charm. Now, 74, there's 3 things that I'm going to talk about that I really like about the 2013 Gatsby that nails it, that gets it right. It's the character Jay Gatsby. It's the direction of Baz Luhrmann. And it's the musically executive produced by Jay-Z. And that, to me, at 2013, that album is dynamite. So what I like, the 74 one with Redford is good. It's just a straightforward story, and there's nothing else to it. So when I see the 2013, and this is where Baz Luhrmann comes in almost better than any other director, is the feast for the eyes that he puts on the screen. And he did it, we talked about, for Romeo and Juliet, and he did it for Moulin Rouge, and he did it to the 10th degree for Great Gatsby, which fits the era of the film. Everything in that movie is enormous, and it's just, he uses every inch of the screen on it. And as soon as you meet Nick, and Nick is enamored with the idea of Jay Gatsby, and it's just an incredible story that really resonates with me. And then everything that Jay Gatsby aspires to be, and we know all the symbolism in the book, the glasses and the green light and all that's great, but what I really like is the idea that Jay Gatsby is brought down by his own hubris. And that's a common theme of a lot of my characters, where he has Daisy. He has everything he wanted. He becomes the man he wanted to be, but he can't let go of the past, and he needs Daisy to admit that she never loved her husband, and she can't do that. And that sets off the dominoes that trickle and bring everything down. And it's just so poetic in the story of that. And like I said, it was Leo, it was Toby, it was a great cast as well at the time. And Baz Luhrmann going and using the contemporary music, I thought was an incredible choice. You're using Jay-Z's Empire State of Mind, I Can't Stop, Over the Love, Little Party Never Killed Nobody with Fergie. It's really cool. It's a movie that if I put on, odds are I'm going to watch at least an hour of it, and I'm going back and I'm watching some other scenes on YouTube. So for me, one that just resonates with the characters, resonates with the themes, the ideas. As a high schooler, even more so as an adult, the green light, we're always striving and chasing the green light. We want it, and we want to be a perfect idealized version of ourselves. And we want to wear the sheens and the masks and the suits to cover. And that goes again for a lot. American Psycho, that, Ripley. So for me, my number 2 is 2013's The Great Gatsby.
Fun fact about The Great Gatsby, have not seen the movie, but I've read that book.
Yeah, everyone did.
Awesome.
That was like the number one.
No, but here's the thing. So yes,
book,
it was a mandatory high school book. So you go, okay, but I still didn't read those. I mean, I bullshitted my way through a lot of those books because you knew what the themes are going to be. But I remember reading Gatsby, and I don't know why. And don't ask me to be like, remember that part with the thing? No, I do not. But I do remember reading that book, finishing it, and going, I enjoyed that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I enjoyed that story. I don't know what it was. People die and stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'm more like Scott than I thought. No, I enjoyed that. So it's funny I haven't seen because I enjoy. I haven't seen Moulin Rouge, but I saw Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. So, and I love that flashiness, right? We were talking about it before. Exactly. I love the book. Why haven't I seen Great Gatsby? I don't know. So I'll put it on the list.
It's popcorn, it's glitter, it's bright lights, big sound, and and Leo, you've seen the meme, you've seen the gif of Leo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. That's great. Okay, so that's a really good pick. That's your number 2, guys. I'm not going to make that mistake this time. Before we head into number 1, it's honorable mentions time.
Now, is it different?
It's honorable mentions.
This is different, though, right?
Do it, Mike. Give us the lowdown on these new dishonorable mentions.
So yeah, I like that dishonorable mentions. This is a little twist, because it's so hard to get a film right, an adaptation from a book right. And there's so many that could make this list. We decided we would do our top 3, or if you want to call it bottom 3, I don't know, that just missed that mark. And this is probably more personal than anything, but just where we were disappointed. And we probably, for me, I went in there amped. I was ready. I read these. I'm like, this is great. And then I walked out going, I don't think I want to read that again because of the movie. So, or at least I'll burn the film when I own it or something. But okay. So
you buy it just to destroy it.
Yeah.
So I roll.
So here we go. So yeah. So we'll go. I'm gonna go sort of reverse in this in taste. So my last one will be the one that I hate the most. Okay. So Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Read this book when it came out. It was there was going to be a trilogy. They did make 3 out of it, but. Went to see it, was so excited. Tim Burton was directing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a book about kids with powers, and Tim Burton's directing it, and it's all really dark and then I watched it and I went, oh, that sucked. Because essentially he changed abilities for no reason. He changed villains when he didn't need to. For some reason, it was all about Samuel L. Jackson's character, which was pretty much created. And then when you get to this one part, and you'll know it if you've read the book and watched the movie, where they're at a fair, and you go to this one part and you go, oh, well, now none of this has anything to do with anything else. And there goes the other 2 movies. Thanks. So that's there was that. Okay. My number 2 going down. And this I can really attest to because they've now redeemed themselves with a TV series. Series of Unfortunate Events.
Oh, yeah. The movie was terrible.
Oh, my gosh.
garbage.
Andrew, talk about taking a book series, 13 books, right?
Yeah.
Just so beautifully crafted by this guy named Lemony Snicket, it's not his real name. I think it's like Daniel Hadler or something like that, but just so beautifully written and so bizarre and so odd. And then trying to take 3 books, shove them into one film, and get people to just overact. It was like the director said, here, do your worst impression of what you think this character should be. Yeah. Meryl Streep was horrible in it. Jim Carrey ruined Count Olaf. And then, thankfully, Netflix got a hold of it and made an amazing adaptation of all 13 books.
Baby.
Oh,
yeah,
so
so good.
That redeemed the series for me. There you go. Right. And no one will be surprised. No one in the world who knows me will be surprised by this. And anyone who's read this book or listened to this audiobook by Will Wheaton, and I've done that about 6 times, 2 of them right back to back because of how good it is Ready Player One. I'm sorry. Say what you want. You can say it's a good film if you pretend it has nothing to do with the book.
Yes.
If you pretend that book didn't exist and Steven Spielberg came up with this, and then you could say, you know what? Good job, Steven. But if you say, Steven, you did a great job taking a story, and I know Ernest Cline had a hand in the screenplay, so shame on him too.
He wrote the screenplay. Yeah, he wrote the screenplay, which doesn't even make any sense.
Well, yeah.
Why it's so bad.
Which irks me and makes me think a lot of that was all about the money. But this book was all about 80s nostalgia, all about the quests and the characters and the journeys. And if you read that book or listen to it if you want, and then watch that film, you will realize that almost nothing is the same.
Really?
Yeah.
Almost nothing. Now, I know going into it, there was things they couldn't do. You weren't going to be able to have a talk through of Matthew Broderick and War Games and certain things. I get it. And certain things were film rights. And clearly Warner Brothers, since they made the film, every character from everything was theirs, right? But it just took away from everything. And the decisions that bugged me about that weren't so much those changes. Some of those things were really cool, like having Chucky come in and all that. Those were really funny. The Shining part, amazing. Not going to take that away. But there was decisions about characters and who solved certain quests and when characters met and things that did not need to be changed at all that Spielberg went in and changed. So the whole story is different, completely different. So that bottom on my list. There you go. Sorry, I was fired up about that one.
Yeah,
we all knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for my Ready Player One.
Honestly, a bunch of us went to see that, and we were so hyped to see that, and I went to see it with them.
And I read it.
We literally were sitting there watching it, and like we didn't talk to each other afterwards. We all went home and we're like depressed for days. We didn't talk about any of it, and just didn't even talk. We're just
probably
like, that was terrible.
Favorite book in a decade. Probably my favorite book in a decade, and I walked out of that going, oh. I had to re-listen to the book to wash away the movie.
Wash away the memory.
Yep.
See, that's why I'm glad I don't read, because I thought Ready Player One was a pretty decent movie.
No, I've since watched it, and like
better. Yeah,
I've since watched it and like tried to separate myself from it, and like I was like, okay, like not knowing anything, this would be a good movie, but yeah, I can't.
Yeah,
no,
it's even as a movie, it's a little teen lit, as a movie, and I think it feels like it should be more. Yeah, exactly. All right, this is only dishonorable mentions, guys. We need to move it.
Oh my god,
it's gonna take forever. We still got to do number ones, but I think all of ours are going to be shorter. Matt, what do you
got? For my dishonorable mentions, I went with 3 other James Bond book movie adaptations.
Yes,
nice.
I'm done with this. I do not like Fleming. Let's go.
Casino Royale from 1967, which I mentioned, is a comedy, self-parody, absolute garbage movie.
Yeah.
And then in no particular order, The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, which the movies don't have anything to do with the book. They just used the titles and then wrote screenplays around them.
Oh,
that's the worst.
So much so that Moonraker and The Spy Who Loved Me movies had to be adapted into books. So there's the novelizations of those movies on shelves somewhere.
Same books.
Amazing.
Nice. That's a good choices.
That's amazing. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's like it has regret written all over it.
Oh.
All right. My 3. So I went with, because again, same situation. I only have one that fits the bill. As a matter of fact, is the top 3 dishonorable mention of a book I've actually read that I was excited that they were making a movie. And then when I saw the movie, I went, oh man, you wasted it. Like you wait. And it really was a waste. It was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh,
That's
Like
fair.
what a great, and I've read
That book
the first 3 for sure. And I think I've like taken on the last 2 books, but I've definitely read the first 3 books, and that's what they tried to cram into one movie. Guys,
Absolutely.
you were sitting on a gold mine. You could have made that into a series, and you had Sam Rockwell attached. The fuck? You screwed up.
do you think it was because like it came in before TV series were the big thing?
Yeah,
Like,
because I think if they had done it as a series, I think they would have crushed it. I think it would have crushed.
HBO,
because you look at what they did. You look what they did with something that's similar in Good Omens. They did Good Omens, which I feel is a very similar book. It's a very similar. I think it made a similar series, and they nailed it. They nailed it.
Yeah.
And I think they would have been the exact same. They would have if they made it now as a series, a limited series.
Yeah. Well, did you guys watch? Did you not watch Dirk Gently?
Oh yeah,
Dirk Gently's amazing.
So, again, Douglas Adams though, same author, some other. The show's amazing, and it gets canceled. And you go, why? How did this get canceled?
Yeah, that was weird. Because it had a following too.
And that's the thing. It's all these weird shows. Anyway, so that's my one that really, really qualifies.
Yeah,
the other two are movies that I saw. One is one that I saw that I wish would have been better, and I know is based on a book. I did not read it, but it's The Time Machine with Guy Pearce. Guy Pearce.
Oh,
What a great
right,
concept for a movie. That should have been a really good movie when you think. And I think I read like a summary, or I might have read a short story. Is it a short story? The Time Machine?
No,
it's
a novel, but his novels are fairly short though.
I may have read that back in the day, and I was like, "What a great idea!" And the Morlocks and stuff, and you can only travel forward, and like, and then how do you screw that up? It was boring.
Time after time instead.
Time after time. All right. And then the last one is one I just happened to catch on TV one time, and I threw it in because it's funny. Mortal Instruments, City of Bones. What a shitty movie.
That's a novel.
It's so fucking terrible.
It's a YA novel series of like 6 books.
It was one of those. I was flicking through. It came on. I was like, and I got sucked in for like 20 minutes. I was like, what am I doing? Get out of it. What? Get out of here. Anyway, it was as I was going through lists, that one came up, and I was like, I thought it'd be funny if I just kind of bitched about City of Bones.
I can't wait till that question comes up on the quiz, the quickie.
Oh my God, no! I don't have to use it. It's not in my top 5. It's dishonorable. I'm good. The only time that movie is brought up in trivia on Mack Flash. All right, let's keep going. AB, what do you got?
All right, my first one will be super quick because I already flashed it, and it's out for everything that Mike talked about. Series of Unfortunate Events. Do yourself a favor and watch the Netflix show because it's 1,000 times better. My number 2, and I don't know really how they were going to adapt it into a movie because it's a strange book. And you'll notice that I don't own any of these movies because these movies are terrible. I only own the books.
Showed us the books, but not the movie.
This is World War Z by Max Brooks. Yeah. When they said they were going to adapt this movie, I didn't understand how they're going to do it because it's a collection of like news reports.
And they did, and they succeeded.
And like they tried to make it into a story, like a character-driven story, and it was awful.
They didn't succeed. Stuff on it is legendary. They re-scrapped the whole last hour. It's unbelievable.
It is the worst.
That movie's
the book is amazing.
$400 million to make.
Yeah, but nothing like the book, right? That's the point.
Yeah,
like, nothing.
The book is like awesome. It's so cool. It's crazy. It's like War of the Worlds. It's like taking these like news reports and like kind of like this like the progression of the zombie apocalypse, and like I loved it because it was so different. Yeah. But
Scott,
that movie sucks.
Scott,
hold on, I got one more.
Wait, Scott, you like?
I thought World War Z was awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. That is an adaptation.
I love this dichotomy. I love it.
No,
Okay.
anyway, as an adaptation. So my number one by far, and this was for me was way more disappointing for me than Ready Player One which was Saying Something, and I knew it was going to be terrible because it was like just based on the troubles that they're having even going into making it, and that is Stephen King, The Dark Tower.
Yeah, it's on the top. It's on the top of every list of like
because
bad adaptations.
The Dark Tower I have been reading progressively over the years because he's slowly written it for the last 20 years. I started reading it when I was like 11, and the last one just came out like a few years ago, which tells you how long it's been for this whole series to come out. And so when they said that it was coming out, I was like, okay, here we go. So I knew going in it was gonna like I got to be
cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. So it came out, and it was the exact same thing as we're talking about. They tried to cram the entire story of I think there's 9 or 10 books into one movie. They changed the main character. So in the movie, the main character is the kid who, this is the first book of the series. Spoiler alert, he dies in that story, and he's not the main character. The main character is this guy, the gunslinger, Roland. This whole story, the whole quest is about Roland, and he's this like side character that is there to help the kid in the movie. And I was so angry about just that. Like, they could have all the rest of the stuff be darned, like them cramming all the different things in it, but the fact that they didn't get the point of the Dark Tower. They didn't understand that it's Roland's journey to quest to get to the Dark Tower. They made it about this stupid kid who has issues. I'm like, get out of here.
Darabont didn't do it, man.
Yeah, that's right. Darabont, please bring me a Dark Tower series, not a movie. Give me a series.
Scott,
please,
what do you
I beg
got
you.
I don't have anything in a particular order. Here's a movie that I promise you guys haven't thought of in 5 years. Remember Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates?
That was a book.
I've ever read in my life.
Why did this come up the other day? I saw I've never heard of this before. This is twice in 1 week. So unless you've brought it up before, which I know you haven't because you're not on Facebook, this movie came up on my feed like 3 days ago. What the shit is this?
Unfilmable. That movie is a stupid the lowest common denominator. But this is a book that the two brothers write, and it's more of like their lives, and it's so goddamn funny. This book is hilarious. Like, these two guys are unbelievably funny, but the little sliver about the dates is like the littlest part in it, and then they took that and turned it into the dumbest American Pie, stupid like one of the spin-off movies that I hated. So that was one where I'm like, this movie's gonna be terrible because you can't do this book. This book is just them being bros, and it's so funny. And that movie is not funny.
Bro. Yeah.
Classic literature.
The other two I got was an audiobook I did. The trailer captivated me, and I love domestic thrillers, which we'll talk about at one. But A Simple Favor, Paul Feig did that one. Blake Lively's good in it, but you got Anna Kendrick doing weird shit. There's another one with her. She was in Mike and Dave. And then the final act with Andrew Reynolds. He comes in and they totally deviate. It's so goddamn stupid. I remember seeing it with my friend Matt, and I was just like, man, the book was such like a wild thriller of like, again, a cat and mouse chess game, and this movie is so fucking Paul Feig is so stupid sometimes when he gets his fingers in things like that. And then my third one.
I love how much we hate our movies. I love how much we hate our like. We're very polite when it comes to good movies. When it comes to the movies we hate, we're like, I fucking hate this movie.
My third one is a book I actually hated. I couldn't finish the book, so I told you I will find out. Hey, Ben Affleck's following up Argo with a Cuban crime drama where he's a mob boss in Florida. I'm gonna do this audiobook. 3 hours in, I'm like, I can't make heads or tails of this. This makes no sense. It was Dennis Lahan who did like Mystic River. He did Shutter Island and another, like a lot of big crime stuff. And it was Live by Night. But I'm like, guys, it's Ben. He's directing it. He just won an Oscar. It's going to be amazing. That movie is a convoluted mess of nothing. Yeah, Ben Affleck is miscast. He plays like this young. He's supposed to be. It tries too hard to be The Departed, where he plays like this police captain's son who goes to work for the mob, and he's supposed to be like this young rookie. But it's Ben Affleck, and he's like 46, and he's like 6'6", and I'm like, man, you give like a guy like Gosling did Gangster Squad like the same year. You give me Gosling in this movie, it's better. And it's just like, why did you forsake me, Ben?
Why have you forsaken me?
Why did you buy? I won't die on the Ben Affleck hill, and you put yourself in this movie, and it just showed that. I mean, he's 3 for 4.
You were the bomb.
But I just did not like Live by Night. So as soon as you said that, I'm like, I remember being really like, didn't like the book, but I'm like, guys, this movie's gonna be awesome. No, that movie was bad. So those are my a bad book made a bad movie.
There you go. Those are all the bad movies we're going to talk about today. I'm sorry if you guys enjoy those movies.
No, we're not.
They're bad. No, not you guys. Oh, yeah. No, we're not. Please, that's it. Let's take a look at our number 1 movies based on books that most of us have read the book to.
Right.
All right,
So,
Mike.
Taking a page out of Matt's book, graphic novels. Can we talk about graphic novels? Graphic novels are the new novels.
These things are
right? Yeah. These are, I mean, comics are great, but I'm a graphic novel guy. If it's not a novel, it's a graphic novel. And this, number 1 for me, as everyone knows who knows me, was a 6-book series, okay, from 2004 to 2010. Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
It's
baby.
a good one, man. That one's really good.
And my favorite thing, I showing this specifically because my favorite thing about this is the Blu-ray. They just put it out in the Steelbook. And my favorite thing about this is if you look at the cover here, you got all of the characters from the graphic novel. But what's great about this is there's like a handful of them. They're not in the film. So like that's like one of the big changes they made. Like I love this movie because it's such a good adaptation. Yeah, they changed a lot of things. It's so Canadian, and a lot of these characters aren't in it, but I don't care because Edgar Wright comes in and like makes this film. This is a British director comes in, makes this film. Could have changed it in any which way. You could have changed the setting. You could have changed a bunch of things, but nope. He says, I'm keeping this in Toronto and I am doing it exactly how it should be done. And so my favorite thing about this film, aside from it's silly, it's fun, just like the graphic novel, is how truly Canadian it is. It's got this amazing Canadian soundtrack. Some of the songs that the bands play, because it's a very musical-based movie. A lot of the songs the bands play are songs by other bands, really. Like there's a Metric song, there's a song Beck sings, there's a bunch of different songs there. And they had a hand in the soundtrack. And my favorite thing, though, when I watch this film is to just look for the little Canadian stuff that's in the graphic novel, because I was worried that would all get lost. But you watch, and in the background, there's pizza, right? And like in the graphic novel, there's a little Zeller's receipt, and you see all these little things, and you're just like, oh, that's so great. And all this, yeah. Oh, all the street signs, they're all the real streets, and all these things like his shirts. Scott's famous in the graphic novel for his shirt changes all the time. And, got these band shirts like Smashing Pumpkins, or you got like the CBC logo and all these things. And he does it throughout the whole film. He's wearing all these shirts. It's just these little things, right? It's silly. It's full of like stars, and kind of before they were like really big stars, right? You got like Brie Larson and Chris Evans and Schwartzman, but you've got so many of these. They're all the evil exes. It's just, I don't know. It just takes this adaptation, in my opinion, to the next level. They do change the ending a little bit, and I noticed that even more in rewatching it than I did the first time around. But I went, I don't really care. Like, they did it in a cool, fun way. And I don't know. It's just truly Canadian for me by a British director. And so that's all I'll say about it. Oh, and the vegan police are the greatest thing on cinema.
It is so Canadian that I actually know a guy who was looking out his window one day and his street was blocked off, and scenes for Scott Pilgrim were being filmed right there on his street in Toronto. And I was like, that is just amazing. And then, so that's why, you do recognize all the scenes. And when you can see it, as someone who's been to those places or whatever, right? You go, oh yeah, no, I totally recognize it, or I see that, or I see the style, that's very Canadian style. So,
I went to Casa Loma after watching it, and they have the whole scene there with Chris Evans up there at Casa Loma with the skateboard thing, and I was just like geeking out about, like my daughter's like, oh, I'm at a castle. I'm like, oh, Scott Pilgrim was here.
That's great. Matt, what do you got for number one? What's your number one?
Well, first I have to ask Mike where he got that Blu-ray because I love that cover.
I got that one in the States.
Oh, okay.
At FYE.
Was that FYE? Yeah, it was FYE exclusive, right?
All
Yeah.
right.
We're going to the States.
Oh,
Anybody going to the States?
Because I love Scott Pilgrim on Blu-ray. I'd probably put it on my top 5 best looking Blu-ray movies.
Sure.
But mine is the one that Universal put out for a bunch of their movies.
Yep.
It's Steelbook as well, but that cover's way better.
I will keep my eyes peeled for you.
So my number one is a movie based on a book that, again, like Romeo and Juliet, has been adapted over and over and over and over again. But this is my favorite version. It's almost tied for another movie based on this same book. My number one is The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So much, yes.
A book, it based on A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Now, I use this one, and the other one I was talking about was Scrooged, which is, of course, tied pretty much for movies based on this book. Now, it's been said about this movie through critics that it's a lot of critics call it the nearest true adaptation to the original book because it has a narrator. Gonzo plays Charles Dickens and talks us through the movie like it was a book. Of course, the best acting in the movie, I mean, it's probably Michael Caine, who was asked to do the movie, and when he said yes, but I'm going to play this role of Ebenezer Scrooge like I'm at the British National Theatre or whatever. And it's going to be straight. I'm not going to wink to the camera. I'm not going to do anything Muppety, and the director, Brian Henson, has said, great, that's what we want. And it works Muppety. So well because he's a perfect straight man to all the wacky Muppet craziness going all around him.
Right.
And it was probably the best role Michael Caine did because it introduced him to me as a kid, because he had a whole career before that, but that's the first movie I saw him in. So every movie after was like, oh, I know him from Muppet Christmas Carol. And he's very good at staying relevant. The next time he did it was for the Batman trilogy, for the Dark Knight trilogy, because there's a whole group of kids who probably didn't know who Michael Caine was until that point. He's very good at staying relevant, Michael Caine. Number one, Muppet Christmas Carol. Just one last note. Fantastic soundtrack. All of the songs in that movie are great. And the last scene where no.
Yeah.
All the great, because in theaters, that song is removed. The love song is removed in theaters, and they added it to the VHS, which is funny because watching that, I was like, where did this? Me and my sister would always fast forward through that love song. And we never understood why. Like, we hated it. We've always fast forward. And then when it came on DVD, you had the option of full screen or widescreen. And widescreen removes that song altogether. And I was like, here we go. This is much better.
That's great.
I hate that they took that out because I love that scene and I love that song. I do. Yeah. Because I think we've talked about this before, where you like it out, but I think I watched it on VHS at some point, and that scene was not in. Maybe it might have been in the DVD, and I watched it, and I was like, "Wait, this is that scene. That scene should be here, where that song, "The Love Is Gone."
We should probably describe it as Scrooge is breaking up with. It's a flashback to Scrooge is breaking up with his girlfriend.
Yeah,
and she sings a song called "The Love Is Gone," and it's removed from. It's not in the theatrical. I just already talked about it. It's not in the theatrical. It's on VHS, and on DVD you can decide whether or not you want it in there.
But I think
it's essential to the movie. I think it's essential to the story because
I think that if you pick the widescreen versus the full screen, not knowing that the story will be affected, you will get a different.
It's like choose your own adventure. It's like, cool. There's different endings for different.
They should warn you, though. They should warn you.
Bandersnatch.
That's really great. I love that. So you went niche on that. I like that.
It's a really
Wow,
good
man.
choice, actually.
Well, I
That's a
went
fun
with
choice.
I guess, but
Well,
I also went with a movie based on a book that I know well enough that I can, consider it works for our list.
I mean, you went Muppety. I mean,
Oh, for sure.
Which, by the way, we are incorporating into our vernacular from now on.
Yes.
Muppety.
I'm going Muppety later. I don't even know what that means.
It's like I'm often accused movies of being cartoony. Like that movie is very cartoony. You know, that shoot 'em up movie is cartoon, but Muppety. I don't think I've ever described a movie as being Muppety.
I traditionally hate straight Christmas stories, just Christmas movies, and that's one of the few ones that I will watch every Christmas because I love it.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. And I like what you said about Michael Caine as well. I think it's a good one. This is speaking of Christmas movies. Speaking of Christmas movies, this is the deal I'm going to make with you guys. I also picked a Christmas movie.
Oh my gosh, I know where you're going with this.
One of my favorite movies, and I actually own the book that it is based on, but I've never read it. I've always said I was going to read it, and I got it for Christmas. I have the children's book version that I've read.
Yes.
My children. I have everything related to this movie. I really like this movie a lot, and that movie is Die Hard, based on Roderick Thorpe's "Nothing Lasts Forever."
He's got a book.
I got a book, guys. Oh my god, he's holding a book. This book is the sequel to The Detective. I'm going to tell the story that everybody knows about Die Hard, and then I'm going to be done about it. But The Detective was the first novel by Roderick Thorpe. Well, not the first novel, but the one before this. And it was made into a movie starring Frank Sinatra as the titular detective. Only Frank Sinatra signed on under the condition that if any sequel were to happen, he had to be offered the part first. Well, lo and behold, a sequel did happen, but like 30 years later. And so at that point, they're like, well, contractually, we have to offer the part of John McClane.
Oh my God.
And they did. And then he did the right
I need to see that movie now. Can somebody make that movie in like animated form or something? I need to see Frank Sinatra, old man Frank Sinatra, Die Hard.
John McClane. Yeah, that's why his name is not John McClane. It is Joe something else. And so they had to change the name in the movie to John McClane. His name is something else in here because Joe blah blah is the detective from that first movie with so my promise to you is that I will read this.
But
Awesome.
when? By when?
Yeah. Gotta give yourself a deadline.
You know how busy I am, and you know I have a family. So give me a reasonable deadline to read this. Here's the print.
Track down the audio book, man.
2020.
Audio book. You can always have audio books to. But I listen, like Matt said, when he like I'm the same way. I all day at work I listen on headphones, and I burn through audiobooks. Like I did all 5 of my books this week.
It's
leading up to it, just listening to it.
It's a Christmas film. Try to get it done by Christmas.
Well, it's literally today is the halfway of the year, so finish it before the back half of the year.
How about I'll get it done?
Mark.
I'll get it done by Christmas in July.
Wow, 1 month.
Nice.
Yeah, July 25th.
Today's the 1st. I get till July 25th. I got 24 days to read this.
Better. That's awesome.
Okay, Christmas in July. I will give you my book report on Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe.
All right.
Excellent. I love this.
I wanted to finish this episode on a great note because I was very afraid of this episode and ignored it for a long time.
You did great. We love it.
So there you have it. That's my number 1. AB, what you got?
All right. So as alluded to, we may have been talking about this movie already. I read this book, which was from 1962. I read it in high school. Like Mike was talking about his thing. This is one of the ones I chose to read for my own and write a paper on it for high school. And that is Ken Casey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was made into a book by Milos Forman in 1975's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Starring Jack Nicholson. When I read this, when I read the book before I watched the movie, and like I've said for the other ones, pretty much most of the what happens in the movie is how I pictured it in the book. And the book is narrated from the chief's perspective. It's the chief telling the story, and you kind of get a little feel of that. I think that's the one major difference, is that you don't really get that notion that it's the chief is the main character who's relaying the stories of what's happening in the asylum. One of the things when I reread it this week listened to it and watched the movie, I really got because he obviously the story, right? He comes in, he's faking being crazy so he can come in, and he starts trying to help these guys who are institutionalized in the asylum and help them to become independent and to fight the tyranny of the head nurse, Nurse Ratched. But when I was reading it this week, I realized that they also help him, because he comes in, he's a rapist, he has done all kinds of crimes, he's obviously done something in order to go into his like prison work detail, and he's kind of a scumbag. He's kind of a scumbag at the beginning of it. He's really funny, he's really charismatic, but at the end of the day, he's kind of a scumbag. Yeah. And by the end of it, he has a chance to escape, and he's clear sailing. All he has to do is walk out of that thing, but he cares about the one character, Billy Babbitt, who's played by Brad Dourif, and he cares and he sticks around because he cares about these people. And he ends up, you see the effect that these guys who society has basically written off as being no good for society, they're helping to change him into a better man. And so the movie is kind of bittersweet. Obviously, it's terrible what happens to him, and it's crushing. But you see the effect that he has on each of these guys, and ultimately on the chief, and he escapes. And in the book, they kind of go into a little more detail where a lot of these guys start checking themselves out because they're not committed. They're there voluntarily, so they start checking themselves out, and that's because of him. That's because of the effect that he had on them, in order that they feel comfortable enough to go back out into society and face society. And
you're not crazier than the next guy on the street, right?
And that's what he says to them. That's what he says to them, that you're no crazier than anybody. And that's one of the all-time best performances for me of all time. Jack Nicholson, he absolutely knocks it out of the park. He deserved the Oscar. And to me, it's his best role. Like he is absolutely killer in this movie. But I love this movie. I've seen this movie hundreds of times. I've read this book a handful of times. It's actually a really short book. I didn't realize how short it was until I did the audiobook, and it's only like 3.5 hours audiobook.
Wow.
It's a quick read.
That's awesome.
But I can't say enough about it. It deserved all the acclaim that it gets, and it deserved all the Oscars it gets, because it's a powerhouse.
Gonna have to watch it real soon. That's great. Great number one. Here we go. Final one. Okay. Scott, number one pick. What do we got?
No, not that one, baby. Yo, that one.
Someone's breaking the rule.
My number one is one that I rode the train and I didn't want to get off. So 2012, Gillian Flynn wrote Gone Girl. And I picked that up, and that winter I read that entirely. 2 days, maybe 3. I think I broke the record. I think I read something else not as good, faster than that. But this was the record for the fastest I ever read a book like this. I read it in probably 2 days on vacation. And to date, it's the reason why I love domestic thrillers. I will go out of my way and read, Girl on the Train, or Wife Between Us, or the Woman in the Window, A Couple Next Door, Before I Go to Sleep, things like that go on in the household that you're guessing what happens. But I think what Gone Girl does it better and takes it up another step. It is that midway twist. Because there's such a special moment in my life where I remember sitting poolside, and I was in like Dominican or something like that with when I went for work and that. And the person I was with, I was like, holy shit, she's live, and faked it. And I handed her the book and walked off the pool face down into, it's such a special moment I will never forget. I walked off the edge of the pool face planted into the water. And I'll never forget that movie had the book had that effect on me. So I just will never forget that moment when I first realized what was happening. And then you see the movie and Ben Affleck starring, and it's directed by David Fincher, and it comes out, and I don't know what it is exactly the same. The only real difference is that they tone down a lot of the secondary characters, but not even anyone who's like not important. Like the parents get muted down, but they're still in it. Other than that, it is a faithful adaptation from beginning to end. It is the exact story, and they're cast perfect. Like I said, I just rewatched it. It is a brisk 2.5-hour film. It is, again, paced perfectly. Affleck's great in it. Affleck plays up his like schwarmy douche character, and first half you believe he's kind of the way he is, but that's all lies. So that's kind of the Usual Suspect style twist. And then there's little bits that are humorous where Affleck's talking about, the character of Nick Dunn, and he's like, the media loves me, they hate me, they love me again. And you're like, that's probably Affleck as a nodding at his own career. And I'm a fan of his career, so I like that little bit in it. But again, it's dimly lit, so it's a very dark film. And then you get Rosamund Pike, who is her performance as Amy Dunn in it, and she is sinister as all hell, and she's one step ahead of everyone.
The Diary.
And dedication and perseverance and all of this, and how she's backtracking and getting this, and how Nick finds out, and they're playing chess. That's what I like. I like that chess stuff. I like that cat and mouse.
Big chess
and they
game,
both switch for who the cat is. But Amy's ultimately the cat throughout the whole thing. And then as it comes back and you get to the final little bit and the real knife dagger into Nick, and that's how the movie concludes, and you're just like, this is unbelievable. So I put that for a multitude, none the least rather being it's the reason why I will go back to domestic thrillers. When I go into chapters, I just want to see, and I'll look for books where wrong wife or the husband does this, or the stalker couple. There's a few books that I saw that piqued my interest, but I'll always go over there because I want to find the next Gone Girl, because Gone Girl had that kind of effect on me as a thriller and an ultimate entertaining film. So my number one, Gone Girl.
Gone Girl. I can get behind that. I can definitely get behind that. Yeah, I definitely love that movie. It was a good one. Guys, a bunch of really good books, a bunch of really good movies. That list is just getting ever expansive. And now I have a book list. This is insane. I have to.
Not just a book list. You got a deadline. You got a deadline.
With a deadline.
That is awesome. I love it.
Who's up next on picking the topic? Oh, first of all, everybody else who's watching right now, please make sure you let us know what your top 5 books. I get the feeling this one's a popular topic because a lot of people talk about it. It seemed that we picked this topic, we didn't tell anybody, and then gradually through trivia, through chats, through stuff, people kept talking about movies based on books. It just kept coming up. I don't know if I was just being more aware or if that what it was, but I get the feeling people are going to love this. So let us know what your top 5 movies based on books, and if you want to do the dishonorable mention thing and let us know which ones
I want to hear it.
just terrible ones. Give us your
especially the ones that we can avoid.
What's your choice, Tom?
Tom.
Especially Tom.
Tom's loyal. I love Tom's comments. I look for him. So what do you got, Tom?
Yeah, that's right. Like? Bring it on. What do we get? Who's picking next? Who's got the topic? Scott?
I got a fun like a wrinkle here. So what I want to do is kind of change things up a bit, so it's not going to be quite about movies. I want to do a list, and there's a reason why, and I'm so excited how I can get to this. But I want to do for next week top 5 favorite movie characters. So 5 favorite movie characters and 3 honorable mentions. So now it opens up the whole gamut.
Nice.
You can talk about people from a saga or people from one film. You can talk about them for any other reason you want. And you can
2 from one movie.
Yeah, you can encapsulate the arc if they have a multitude of it, or you can talk about that. But I want to talk about your top 5 favorite movie characters and then your 3 honorable mentions. But I did this years ago. I did like my top 50. And it's changed a little bit, certainly in my top 5, definitely. But favorite movie characters.
All right, top 5 movie characters next week. And of course, don't miss the companion quiz to this top 5 movies based on books. As always, thank you very much, gentlemen. What a great that was a really great episode. I really enjoyed it a lot. How about you guys?
Oh yeah,
It's great.
Yeah,
yeah.
Professor?
How's that pipe, man?
Indeed.
Professor,
Indeed.
give us a grade.
A plus.
A plus,
All
A
right.
plus.